She knows about she have been taking those tears. And in most occasions, you are very innocent about those things. You don't know how to
Oh,
respond.
you have to go outside. You have to go outside.
No.
Is that true? Check one, two, check. Check
Yeah.
one, two.
So,
Check one, two, check one. Check. Mm.
I'm seeing everybody at New Year's today. Hi.
Very well. Nice to see
I
you.
didn't see you at the after party the
Yeah, I
other
mean,
day.
I couldn't make it
Oh,
because
oh,
I had
sorry.
other things to
It
do.
was fun.
I saw videos.
Oh, okay. Hopefully you'll be at this one soon. Oh. Hi. Good morning. My name is Figuro. Oh, nice to meet you.
yes. No, no problem.
Hello. Hi. My name is Figuro. Nice to meet you. Well done. No, it's horrible actually. I'm from Delta State. There's all Ghanaian Figuro. Yes, exactly. You know us so well. There's Figuro and then there's Figuro. Exactly. Yeah. Well done. Thank you. Thank you. I'm not sitting in
Still
one.
true.
I did not register for the after party. Oh, the registration.
Yeah.
Oh, this is for serious people. Yeah. I mean that everyone is Well, why do you have to wait for the party? This is where you get knowledge, right? Yeah. What it is. Like I say, with the ticket over. Yeah.
Sounds good.
Yeah.
Sound
You need a
good to
ticket to
stay.
get into the venue for the after party.
So all my friends are said they are going to meet me here. For what?
After party. No.
Oh my god. So who's that?
Check.
Talk again. Sure.
Check again. It's just like that's delay.
Should I bring the network down here?
Where's the network?
It's called.
Hi. Hi, technical crew. Can we have the lights go in? Good morning, everybody, and thank you all for coming early. We are going to make a few announcements, introduce ourselves, and we'll give you 15 more minutes before we start. Good morning, everybody. My name is Chindu Maike. I'm the program officer for the initiative for Equal Rights. Sorry that I hesitated because something happened, but that's for another day. And I'm the program officer for the Initiative for Equal Rights. And with me here today is
Alexandra Madwabu, pronouns they, he, and also project officer at the Initiative for Equal Rights. I'm happy to be here and I look forward to the conversations we're about to have.
thank you so much. So some house rules before we officially start is we are showing some of the resources that we have developed over the years. What was playing at before this came up was a trailer of a documentary series that we did. It's called Where Women Marry Wives, and it was actually highlighting how the queer culture existed in African culture way before colonialization came about. And we were able to talk to a few people who are actually in same-sex likely relationship or marriages here in Nigeria, and we highlighted all of that. So we are going to just keep playing it for the next 5 minutes before we come up here again and officially start. Once again, thank you all for coming today.
So you can actually now zoom into this panelist, like forget about this big screen. Do you get?
I will not stay again and there. I want
We are like sisters. We are like all the people, all the provides marriage. They took my mother as their mother. Yes, just like they took her. That's how they we relate with them as sisters. Unbelievable. Everybody can say, tell, assumes around them. Then we take it. Forgot why. Why private? I don't when I was growing up with her, being that she don't have a child, she always, she's not happy at such. But since these children started coming, she's now happy because she has seen somebody, people that are calling her mother, mother, mother. So she was happy. But from time to time, what she do is that she will carry, if it's the first one now that will go as friend 1 month there. After that one will come back, then the other one will go just like that. None of them have stayed up to 1 year without reaching them because they normally do their family. Sometimes they go together, sometimes they will go one after the other. A lot of quarrel, mates, wife rivalries is always there. No matter how, she just have that mind to bring them together because from time to time quarrel and especially when she married the second one, the first one now was like why did they every time talk was she knows how she don't get her wisdom to handle it very well if it's not proper. If I must advise somebody to do it, you should just marry one, not two. I read the biography of a lady, Omo of Osamari, and Omo was a very wealthy woman, like most female chiefs West of Nigeria. She had so many female wives whom she used for her trade. They featured in her trading activities and they did other things. It was part of also building her empire, having the clout of being a female husband, being a head of household and so on and so forth, having all the trappings of a male, but not being physically male. Omo was a lady that lived in the late 1800s, early 1900s. Situation then was different. When I came to the Eastern Igbo area, I could tell different categories of this relationship. Those that were contemporaries of Omo, of Osamari, did basically the way she did. They were renowned traders, female traders. There were women that wanted to get into the male structure, but in terms of politics, local governance, and every other thing. These women, in the process of building themselves and building their households, acquired female wives. The female wives had a multiplicity of purposes depending on what they needed them for. Some had these women to support them in their businesses. Some married women to have children. Some married women just to have other women under them, to actualize their ascribed male status. That was in that generation. Fathers who loved their daughters so much, they didn't want to part with their daughters. They rather prefer to retain their daughters in the house. So the father will now either do a kind of present a goat or whatever to the extended family and to say, I'm retaining my daughter in the house. That daughter will have ascribed male status. That daughter in the house can marry women to have children for her. That daughter can also be in the house having children that will bear the father's name.
Initially, I've had a son biologically, but with the demands in our Calabari setting, it's like I was still empty, I was not complete. I wanted to enlarge my family, my own family, as well as my husband's family, where I'm married to. So I now ask myself, how can I survive with only one child, one son? So that now forced me to look for a girl to marry to increase my numerical strength in my husband's house.
Mostly, it is done outside the Calabari gland. It's not within the Calabari gland. So they will now go to the neighboring places.
I called the agent and told her I wanted to bet I can't go to Igbo land if she can assist me. So she brought two girls, no, three of them. I chose this very one. Initially I did not choose her. I said I did not like any of them. And she insisted she wants to be in this family. I said no. Then my husband was alive. They came back later in the night when we had all gone to bed.
Mizaezi azefumuni. Banja imumato. Adikorire no pada kori. Ani azekorire. So want to jani. Probably just it on. Ne sane sane. Nika kujaba sabaya. Then I'm a chu. Ahima.
Ndụmọdụ onye ọbụla omenala ekele na nwunye na ndụmọdụ onye ọbụla ka aka ka anyị obuzo gị na elewe nọ anụ wuli ndị ụlọ ọbụla kelere ebe ụzọ na-abaghị arụsị na ọdụ ya abịa ebe ụzọ alegiri nna
Thank you all for your patience and for that documentary you just saw. It's very rich with a lot of information about pre-colonial Nigeria and some of our traditions that are being demonized in recent times. So if you want to continue watching this documentary, please go to our YouTube page, Tears Nigeria, on YouTube, and you see all of our media works there. We have series, other series, we have drama, We have documentaries and everything you can need to inform yourself about LGBTQI issues and rights here in Nigeria. Thank you.
Exactly that. Thank you, Uma. So, once again, welcome everyone to our 9th annual Human Rights, Sexuality and the Law Symposium. We look forward to having enlightening conversations that will make meaningful impact on the LGBTQI plus movement in Nigeria, and then obviously the human rights movement as a whole. Yeah.
So, when we talk about the Initiative for Equal Rights, I believe everybody here knows about TEARS. But we will not assume, and I'll just do a brief explanation, introduction, and summary of what TEARS has been doing for the last years. So TEARS was established in 2005 by a group of, queer folks who thought that there was a need to actually address the issue of HIV here in Nigeria. And over the years, at 2010, we were legally registered. So TEARS is compromised with 4 thematic areas. That's what we do at TEARS. We actually do human rights and advocacy, where we document human rights violations based on subjects as sexual orientation, gender identity and expression, and sex characteristics. We document, and not only that, we respond to human rights violations. I don't know if anybody here knows of TEARS' National Helpline. If you don't know, by the end of this program, we'll highlight some of the numbers. So we use this helpline to actually respond to cases of human rights violations based on SUGIs. We document it, and we do this with partners who some of them are here, some will be joining virtually. And we also do high-level advocacy. What does this mean? We interact with police officers to say we have a lot of violence, we have a lot of profiling from police officers who will profile queer folks, especially gender non-conforming persons, and actually want to extort them. Things like arbitrary arrests, detentions. So we do engagement with the police. It's been slow, but it's been steady, and we'll get there. We also engage with other human rights organizations, the NHRC, we engage with other law enforcement agencies, and generally movement building with other movements. So for another thematic area that we do health and wellness. So TEARS, again, I want to ask, do we know that TEARS has a wellness center, a clinic? Does anybody? If you do not know, please, again, we would actually give you the information by the end of today. So TEARS runs a clinic, right? We run a clinic, and not just HIV management. We actually do general well-being. Are you a queer person? Do you need medical advice? Do you need medical services? Come to our clinic. Although we might be changing the address of this clinic soon, but that information will be put out. We also do research. What we do in research, we do researches, we do documentation, and then we publish the results for this research. One of the researches we have done in TEARS is pre-colonial identities of queer persons, which we translated into the Where Women Marry Wives documentary that we just saw. So these are some of the things we do under research. We do our monthly QHRs. I don't know if you guys tune in for our QHRs. We do monthly QHRs. We also have podcasts. We also do community dialogues. And we do a whole lot of things, but I don't want to belabor you with all of that, right? So this is what we do at TEARS. And in recent times, TEARS is actually positioning itself to be stronger for the community. We want to engage with the community more. We want community members to come into TEARS and actually feel like home, belong, and actually have their needs met. We have a lot of plans that will roll out for next year, and we hope that every single person here will engage. So the Initiative for Equal Rights is solidly and steadily behind every queer person in Nigeria, and will continue to do so for as long as we exist. Thank you.
Yes, thank you very much for that. And so now we'd like to introduce our executive director. Here's a brief background on him before he comes up to give his opening speech. His name is Afolabi Ayila. And his bio, I'm reading now. Before joining TIERS, he led corporate communications, PR, and branding initiatives, successfully communicating the identity and values of nonprofits. His focus has always been on cultivating collaborations and networks within the health and business sectors, playing a vital role in promoting the nonprofit's mission to improve healthcare in Nigeria through strategic partnerships with the private sector. Through collaboration with government agencies, businesses, and civil society organizations, he has led teams that have tackled healthcare challenges and implemented lasting changes, particularly with the revitalization of primary healthcare centers across various local government areas in Nigeria. As a leader of TIERS, one of his missions is to overturn the SSMPA 2014. I think this is a speed round. His guiding principles center around inclusivity, advocacy, and empowerment. He believes in fostering a diverse and supportive environment that embraces the unique experiences within the LGBTQ community.
Let's all welcome our executive director to the stage. And as he does that, I want to also highlight our theme for this year, which is in solidarity, building alliances for strengthened human rights movements.
All right, good morning, everyone. Good morning. Welcome to this beautiful event, the Symposium. So, like she rightly said, a good introduction. Thank you very much. Like you rightly said. My name is Afolabi Ayola. I first of all want to recognize the institution that is TIERS and what we've been doing for a long time. I think it's such a profound opportunity to be here and to lead the team that I think is very intelligent, very capable, towards constantly achieving our goals, one of which they mentioned earlier. I'm very appreciative of the opportunity. I see the possibilities are endless. The possibilities are endless, and I mean, we've had conversations internally, and these things are seeds that, you know, externally you begin to see it as the years go by. I want to continue the work that has already been done. I think it's really impactful work, but I also want to bring some innovation into it. I want to shake, you know, the status quo a bit, so that there are angles or there are areas which we haven't maybe charted that we must begin to chart, because fundamentally, everybody should feel free, everybody should feel accepted, everybody should feel like they belong to a place and that they can be their full authentic selves wherever they find themselves. And it's our job to ensure that, to foster that, and to continue to lead the charge towards getting that in Nigeria. I don't want to take our time today only because I am so interested in, you know, the panel sessions. I think these discussions are vital because these are the seeds that we need to plant, you know, to get the word out there, to stop discrimination, you know, the advocacy that we need. We need more things like this, more platforms like this to begin to, or to continue to ring the alarm that, you know, we're here and we're not going anywhere. And the safe strategic ways that we can exist within the space until it becomes legal for us to be our authentic selves within the space. So again, I would like to thank, you know, the organizers of this symposium. I hope that even in the coming times when we have a call, I know that a lot of people wanted to be here, but it's a different thing from what we can see now. And I know that people generally don't respect time. So a lot of people will come as we progress. However, I'm hoping that with time, people will rush to things like this, knowing fully well that this is the key to, or things like this, activities like this are the key to where we want to go. We need to talk, we need to dialogue, we need to talk with the right people. You know, we need to change laws, we need to change policy, we need to change perceptions. It starts from here. So again, I'd like to say welcome. Please be as involved and participate as much as possible. We are very happy to receive you. We hope that this successfully, we plant seeds here that even when we come back here next year, we can, go back to today to say we said this thing today and we can now see it physically happening. So thank you very much for being here.
Thank you so much, Afolabi. I know I'm looking forward to what's to come. Exciting times, new times, a lot of change is coming. Okay, so let's move on right to the next activity, which is to introduce our keynote speaker, one of my faves in the whole wide world. I'll just go ahead and read her bio, and then she will come up. So our keynote speaker is Omolara Oreye. Omolara is a lawyer and decolonial feminist organizer, confronting power structures and systems of oppression through the embodiment of knowledge as liberatory practice. Omolara is grounded by feminist, Pan-African, and anti-colonial ideals and supports individuals and collectives to do the intentional work of dismantling imperialist and patriarchal structures and building the blocks for individual and collective liberation. She co-leads the work of the Liberation Alliance Africa, a feminist Pan-African collective. Before Liberation Alliance Africa, Omolara was a program specialist who managed the CASA initiative at the African Women's Development Fund and the executive director at the Initiative for Equal Rights before that. Omolara's work is rooted in and always in the service of love.
Welcome, Omolara, and thank you for being here today.
Thank you so much, everybody. I get really uncomfortable with bios and stuff like that. But I know that, it's okay for us to own our work from time to time. I'm so happy to be here. And interestingly, the first time that I had contact with tears was at the first symposium in 2015. Yes, I had met Yomi a month or so before that day, and I had done some informal, I think it was a police situation, and I worked at Fulham at the time, and they were looking for a lawyer, and I was like, I don't like to go to police station, but let's see, let's go there. And then we went, and it felt like there was this whole new world that I was a part of, and I was like, oh my God, wow. And I've never left since then. And the first symposium in 2015, I remember that I attended and I sat somewhere there, and I was just like, I didn't know people were organizing on this level. So at the time of this MPA, obviously my friends were activists within the space, and I was doing more law stuff and all of that. And I was like, okay, the organizing just felt so mature and so real and so big, and I was like, this is amazing. And I feel like we all must play our part in the liberation of ourselves and others. So I have prepared a keynote speech. When Chindima asked me to give it, I was like, what do they say in those? Like, what do you say? You just want to say some big English. I was like, yeah, that's not my style. But it's home. And maybe this is my ushering into the world of big grammar and special treatment. All right. Yes. So, right. So I wrote a speech, and I will read it to us.
That's fine.
Right. Girls, girls, boys, MBs, esteemed guests, advocates for human rights. It is an honor for me to be here today, especially to discuss matters around solidarity, which is becoming much more urgent in the way we organize and the way we advocate. Historically, alliances are pivotal to success in struggle for equal rights. In South Africa, for instance, some multiracial religious groups were allies to combat apartheid, the same could be said for the women's rights movement across the world. Building alliances and solidarity is central to the liberation struggle. The notion that solidarity, justice, and human rights are cut from the same cloth is one that I subscribe to. Solidarity and justice are often portrayed as theoretical adversaries by Western academics, despite having a shared purpose and the common spirit of advocacy. If we take human rights to be the primary driver of justice, we can identify at least one important reason for the presumed opposition. Solidarity asks us to respond to the needs of others, while rights are claims we make on behalf of ourselves against others. One stresses community, and the other stresses autonomy. And when we really look at it, should community and autonomy be at loggerheads? No, they are the same thing. They work together to give, like, a well-rounded sense of personhood. This is because the Western notions of human rights are deeply individualistic and rightfully fueled skepticisms at different points of the discourse on the continent. African academics in the 70s, at the initial discussions around the creation of the African Charter, were opposed to the idea of just an individualistic look of human rights. C.C. Mojeku wrote that African concepts of human rights are very different from those of Western Europe. Communalism and communal rights concepts are fundamental to understanding African culture, politics, and society. One should not make the mistake of thinking that the colonial interlude washed away these fundamental cultures. This speaks to binaries in which Western hegemonies operate, the idea of divide and conquer. Because you see, as indigenous peoples, we engage in the world through a pluriversal lens. That is, we know that there are several ways to get into the market. In Yoruba, they will say, "Onoko Waja." We know that there are many, many ways to skin a cat. We know that you don't have to have this or that. It is possible to have autonomy, and it is also possible to have communal solidarity. It is not one or the other. If human rights is everything we need, this individualistic approach to human rights, then why do we have issues like, like DRC, like Congo? Why have we watched helplessly as the West eviscerates Gaza in the last 2 months? Why can a country veto such serious decisions at the highest human rights body if human rights is all we need? Why propaganda, for example? Why is Belgium allegedly ripping flags from buildings? It is because solidarity is powerful, and power hegemonies are afraid when the people unite. The economic pillaging of colonialism has been emphasized, and we will continue to emphasize that. The intellectual and epistemic robbery will continue to be accounted for. But in the same vein, we must account for the erosion of solidarity in our ways of being. The ideals that is Ubuntu from Southern Africa, or the Yoruba concept of Omoluabi. These communal offerings have been replaced by individualism for capitalist extraction and subjugation. Now, I want to talk about the state of play in Nigeria. The consequences of colonialism have been far-reaching, also for legal systems. When European colonizers and pillagers invaded this continent, they imposed also their penal codes. These included punishments for sodomy, unnatural acts, and homosexuality. The major colonial powers in the Africa were actually France and the UK, Belgium and the others, but you know, the UK was much more interested in legal control, especially of puritanical like social behavior, like banning some kind of sex. If you remember, if you are aware, you see in Liberia, things as basic, you know, more basic things, and sexual acts that occur between heterosexual couples are still banned under the penal code in Liberia. It is not news that we know that nobody's bedroom should be legislated, right, by the state. As a result, freedom, equality, and dignity in human rights in Nigeria are subjected to a plethora of violations. This is especially true for persons who identify as lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, queer, and/or intersex. Various forms of violence are carried out against persons based on their perceived or real sexual identity expression, sexual characteristics, and sexual orientation by a wide group of persons, including family, friends, religious groups, public institutions, and the general society. The oppression against LGBTQI persons in Nigeria is continuous and pervasive, and is fueled by discriminatory laws and widespread homophobia, which have their roots in colonial violence, religious fundamentalisms, and social norms. The Nigerian society today, indeed the African reality, has proven itself hostile to LGBTQI persons, and human rights organizations continue to record instances of persecutions against sexual and gender minorities by family members, friends, co-workers, church, mosque members, neighbors, the public, and the state security agencies, especially members of the Nigerian police. LGBTQI persons continue to be vulnerable to diverse forms of harassment, including being catfished online, and subjected to blackmail, extortion, and kidnapping. Let's talk about political homophobia. Because we know that the question of puritanical sexual legislations is not a question of morality, it is that of power. Because nobody subjects the rich and powerful to moral questions, and the rich and powerful create a world where their proclivities can thrive. However, when it comes to legislating the bedrooms of people, it is political. It is not just a harmless, it is about advancing their political power by dividing and conquering. The difference between homophobia in general and political homophobia is that the latter is used as a strategic tool to achieve political power or goals. Political homophobia has labeled homosexuality as un-African. This labeling strategy, reiterated by politicians, religious leaders, and nationalists across the continent, argues that homosexuality and other sexual orientations and gender identities are Western imports, destroying the African culture, values, and society. It is presented as Western cultural imperialism. It is really rich of governments who are indebted to the World Bank and IMF to the tune of 87 trillion to speak about Western imperialism. Because the very idea of neoliberalism and the idea of public debt is a tool of perpetuation of neocolonialism. It is Western imperialism is welcomed by the government in form of money, but it cannot be welcomed by the government in form of personal freedoms. So you see where we see the political use of homophobia. And not to say that Western imperialism should welcome under any circumstances, but political mass. African presidents from Uganda to Nigeria to Kenya to Egypt have used this rhetoric. These aims linked to the use of political homophobia in Africa are often ways to divert attention from other issues such as the economy, development, corruption, elections, and other crises, for example, the COVID-19. and align themselves with propaganda. To truly understand the roots of anti-rights movements and anti-gender movements, we must dissect their connections to the broader systems of extraction, subjugation, and neocolonialism. It is no coincidence that the region's rich and natural resources witness heightened instances of discrimination and violence. It is no coincidence that political homophobia is used to divide, so that when we are obviously busy with surviving, extractive industries and capitalist giants continue to extract and subjugate the continent, and we are preoccupied with conversations such as this. The struggle against anti-LGBTQIA and feminist movements is intrinsically linked to the broader fight against neocolonial forces perpetuating systems of oppression. The passing of the Anti-Homosexuality Act by Uganda's parliament in March 2023 has resurfaced worldwide attention to the issue of criminalization of LGBTQ people. Even though for years, activists have called out a deliberate strategy implemented across Africa by global anti-gender and anti-rights groups, supported by governments, media, and the education sector, characterized with defamatory and populist rhetoric targeting specific communities. Drawing critical decolonial feminist perspectives in examining the dynamics of anti-gender movements, the resulting erosion of democratic processes and the rise of authoritarian movements that threaten the rights of women and LGBTQ persons in Africa helps us explain how political polarization serves the neocolonial agenda. This includes an analysis of ways in which anti-gender movements intersect with neocolonial forces, reinforcing structural violence and challenging progress towards gender justice. Over the last 10 years, Africa has witnessed a growing dominance of anti-gender movements attacking sexual reproductive health and rights of women and girls and LGBTQI rights through norms and policy. There is a need to explore insights into how the conceptions of power underlying the ideologies reinforcing patriarchal structures and resisting our efforts as Africans to create a world where we can all thrive. The human rights crisis is spreading rapidly across the continent, with countries like Kenya, Burundi, Ghana, Senegal, and Tanzania considering surrogates of the Ugandan law, which directly contributes to the closure of civic space, disruptions in HIV, AIDS, and sexual reproductive health and rights programming, ultimately threatening community livelihoods, is a colonial project, and our leaders are unfortunately exchanging ivory. The African Charter on Human People's Rights and the right to solidarity. Did you know that as Africans, we have a unique set of rights that gives us a right to solidarity, a right to self-determination? The African Charter came into force in October 1986, and all Africans became the bearers of these unique and unprecedented rights. Significantly, the Charter recognized the right of all peoples to self-determination, and with it, the right to the assistance of the state parties to the present Charter in their liberation struggle. In this sense, the African Charter truly enshrines a right to solidarity. This was considered monumental at the time because of the role of alliances and solidarity in South Africa's victory over the apartheid regime. However, as we all know, the struggle continues, not only in South Africa, but across the continent. That is, the struggle for the very existence and equality of peoples, for genuine self-determination and sovereignty over our natural resources, for peace, for development, and a healthy environment continues. In many ways, the LGBTQ liberation is a timeless struggle between society and the state, a struggle that is far from over, And if we are to succeed, we will require, above all, solidarity. The recognition of the solidarity rights of the African Charter is rooted in two reasons, unique to the African worldview. One reason is historical. Remembering the African experiences of human rights violations was largely, widespread. Remembering systemic violations of the rights of entire peoples rather than specific individuals. Because with colonialism, with slavery, with all of these historical wrongs, they were not, wrongs that were done against one person. It was collective punishment. And now when you think about that, you think that a framework for individualized rights, can it really answer these questions? Because if you're punishing a group of people collectively, you're extracting collectively, you are robbing collectively, and then you injure. I always make an example. If somebody enslaved you for 400 years and came back with a religion that asks you to forgive, no questions asked, a little suspicion, eh? Just a little bit, I believe that people can be religious, people can live their truth and live their lives, to the best of their abilities. But I think that some structures require questioning. I think some ideas require questioning on some level. And therefore, the African worldview really does not particularly support an individualistic approach to human rights. Rather, an approach that protects human dignity on an individual level, but also gives room for solidarity so that we can protect one another. Because our experiences have shown us that not only do we have to protect ourselves as individuals, we also have a collective job to protect our resources, to protect our culture, to protect our intellectual products, to protect everything about this continent. So why should we build alliances? Building alliances is not just advisable at this point, it's crucial. For the longest time, our entry point into the human rights conversation was based on ideals of probably the UN, the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, but more and more we are realizing that some are more equal than others. And therefore, the African Charter on Human and People's Rights provide us with a respite, because we do not have to subject ourselves to universalized approaches of human rights. We can look through our African worldview that allows us to take human rights seriously, but also take solidarity seriously, thereby undoing, the harm of divide and conquer and propaganda. We continue to witness white supremacist world order holding the world hostage, employing its divide and conquer tactics for further subjugation and extraction from Congo to Palestine. When I say Congo, I mean the Republic of Congo, DRC. So for us to look at LGBTI struggles as something that's occurring in a vacuum would be a great mistake. This is a movement against colonial violence. Our struggles against anti-rights movements are interconnected. An assault on one community is an assault on all the principles that we hold dear. By forging alliances, we can amplify our collective voices and challenge the structural inequalities that continue to fuel discrimination. We need to do 4 things. I've made a list. We need to center intersectionality in our analysis. Yeah. What else do we say about that? There is the need to recognize that we all have a unique relationship in oppression. Not that whatever combination or constellation you find yourself is more severe than the other person, but that what you are experiencing is unique, and therefore those experiences cannot be dealt with as if they're just one-sided. It was Audre Lorde that said that we do not live single-issue lives. We need to build people power. I always make a comment that the power of the people is bigger than the people in power. We have been shown time and time again that what we have as activists are dreams. But dreams are worth something. Take your eyes away from what the world is looking at right now. We feel helpless, we feel hopeless. we are scared. But what we have is the power to create a future. What we have is the power to dream of realities in which we enjoy freedom and liberation. Push back against neo-colonial anti-rights movements, sweeping the continent and closing civic spaces. Take your mind away from the fact that, anti-rights movements are only targeting one group. It is not just about one group. If it touches you, it's gonna touch me. Because when people allow these things to happen to the most vulnerable groups, then they begin to find out that this thing happens to them as well. Because it is not, the anti-rights, anti-gender groups are not targeting LGBT people. They are targeting the capture of this continent. A recapture, if I may say. It is, but they want to start with the most vulnerable. Because when they use that rhetoric, people who think that they have something to gain from the hegemony align with them. Whereas when the capture occurs, we are all gonna be in there. That's my favorite thing about human rights. When you're celebrating that they're punishing somebody, just be preparing for your own punishment, because it's like a jollof rice. It will reach everybody. And finally, we need to prioritize solidarity in our human rights work. We need to move away from the ideals of an individualistic approach to life, both on a private level, but I want to speak more to our work within the movements. Recently I was reading a document, and I found out that there is so much competition, there is so much animosity amongst movements, and I must say that people are not crazy. It is the capitalists pitting together against one another. It is not that you are crazy or that you are evil or what, you're not. You are just responding because at the base of our being as human beings is the need to survive. When the need to survive is triggered, then people behave a certain way. So we must hold each other in community and in love. We must hold each other knowing that the seed of discord is not naturally planted in us. We are not naturally, just angry at one another. A bunch, what happens? You become more effective, you become more robust, you become more, you become more knowledgeable, because now there's so many of us working together. So going forward in our work, I want to take away two things. One, the right to solidarity is unique to you as Africans, and that is a beautiful angle to start looking at the work from. What does human rights promise us through an African prism? When people say African culture, African values, I always say that the only African culture, African value that I recognize is the African Charter on Human and People's Rights. And that is what we should do going forward. Thank you. Can we give another round of applause? Thank you to our keynote speaker for that wonderful keynote speech. We were talking about you don't know what to say, the big words, and just came and just gave us as his words. Thank you so much, and I hope that what Omolara has said keeps, recurring and reflecting in our minds. How can we come together
be in solidarity, to work together and achieve our goals. So we'll be moving on now to the first panel for today. And I will take a seat. Where should I sit? I'll sit here. And I'll just, invite my panelists one after the other to come join me here on stage so that we can have, some discussions about this particular panel. So the first panel for today is called Collaborative Activism for Combating Anti-Rights Agenda in Nigeria. We have been talking about a lot of anti-rights, workings and groupings and activities in recent times. We want to discuss that. And basically this panel will facilitate a strategic conversation on addressing discriminatory and rights violation agenda in our country, Nigeria. When we talk about anti-rights agenda, like Munara said, it's not just an LGBTQI issue. It came from Roe versus Wade abroad, and then it trickled down into Nigeria. We tend to think that whatever happens in other countries will not affect us, but like jollof rice again, it will go around. So basically, right, this panel will look through how we can collaborate as activists within our diverse movements. And this panel will also explore effective approaches to resist and counter-attack anti-rights legislation, policies, and societal attitudes. And we'll also delve into key areas such as engaging with the government, shaping public perceptions, employing legal strategies, and building community empowerment initiatives. Very important that we come together as a community and execute initiatives. So basically the overarching goal is to inspire actionable insights, not just talk. We come to panels every day. I'm very sure if we count the number of panels you have attended, we cannot count. We talk. But I hope that when we talk today, we are talking about actions and actions that we will take back and work on. So on this note, I would invite the first panelist seen on my screen, which is Godwin Kalu. Godwin Kalu is an epidemiologist who is the Director of Research and Knowledge Management at the Initiative for Equal Rights, TIERS. Previously, he was the Monitoring and Evaluation Coordinator at TIERS for over 2 years before leading the research unit. He has spent the last 5 years in the development sector, and he presently leads and directs the development of research methodologies to create data okay, look at what they have in place and see how it has helped, the lives and welfare of women and persons in that community. If it's being taken out, we cannot even reference that. What does it mean for us in Nigeria? And then we can see how it was 2 years ago when Lagos State drafted the regulation article on, abortion care. Like when abortion care is accepted in Lagos State and guidelines for abortion care. What happened? 2 weeks after this guideline was released, and it took over 5 years to come up with these guidelines, the Ministry of Health was in talks with these and other NGOs. They developed this thing according to our constitution, because our constitution and some of these laws, they actually provide for abortion in some instances, and they did this like guideline. What happened? 2 weeks after this guideline was actually unveiled, they actually withdrew it and said they are withdrawing it to review it. This was after the Catholic Church reached out to the government office to say that, no, we do not want this. And then it now leads us to the conversation about religion and anti-rights, and how religion plays a very huge role in the anti-right movement, not just in Nigeria, but all over the world. And these are questions and these are issues we continue to see every day about the anti-right agenda in Nigeria. Now, for my first question, I want to ask, I think I'll phrase this question to Godwin. What are the key components of the current anti-rights agenda in Nigeria, particularly concerning human rights and LGBT rights issues, as well as other minority group rights?
All right, thank you so much, Uma, for the wonderful question. And thank you everyone for being here. So I think I would actually begin my response with a short story or experience I had during my NYSC in Delta State. So I was, as every young Nigerian, I also sort of volunteered myself to be trained as a peer educator trainer. So I was in the COPS peer educator trainer group. So when we were posted to secondary schools to sort of educate young adolescents on HIV prevention and all of those strategies, to even around informed consent and assertiveness. So one thing is they gave us a strict instruction. So I know some of us are familiar with the ABC of HIV prevention, which is abstain from sex, be faithful to your partner, and consistent use of condom. So we're given a strict instruction not to talk about the C part of the prevention guideline. We were told when you get to the class, just talk to the young people about abstinence, and of course they were not married, so being faithful to their partner was not really a point to start elaborating. However, when we got to the classroom, you begin to actually see different reality from the instructions that you are given. You are talking to these young people, they are already aware about sex, a lot of them are already doing it, most of them want to know more, but you can't say anything because you can't tell them, okay, use condom. You can't also tell them how to access contraceptives and all of those things. So you are just stuck in between. So what we eventually did as trainers was, we say, oh, if you need further information, call us personally. We drop our phone numbers or email address, and then you see questions pouring out and pouring out. So why am I sharing this is, on most occasions, the anti-right groups, they came in through HIV prevention, which they are also still operating, and they'll tell you that the reason why HIV is spreading is because people have deviated from monogamy. People have deviated from the one man, one woman, or whatever they say. So, and then they will share research. They will definitely share research from scientific journals to say HIV is spreading in Africa because Africans have been, the Westerners are saying Africa should start embracing liberal sexuality, you know. And those things keep happening, and then now is, I mean, they've been trying that, they've operated on that in Nigeria. They tell us anywhere you see gay people, they are coming. Public narrative. So most times, what you just see in all of their model of operandi is there is always using narrative, you know, to shift perceptions. And because it suits those who are in power, they just embrace it. They keep telling you, this is how family is supposed to be. And but in the real sense of it, you would agree with me as Africans, our mothers were more or less the people that really had very close relationship with the children. The fathers were always, it's either they are hunting or they are farming somewhere, you know, they're just coming as one lion, and the cubs are all shrinking in their mother's bosom. That was how it was. So should we now say, now that we've evolved into families having conversations at the dinner table, you know, you're asking your child, what do you think about this? What is your opinion on this particular family guideline we want to put in place? Maybe you want to start the rosters. What do you think? Should we not say those things are imported from West? Because the traditional Africa, when we started, you dare not sit in the same table with your parents. All right, but now we are sitting at the same table. People are evolving. Children are beginning to have opinion at home. So, and all of the narratives they keep pushing is just around saying family. And the most demeaning part is they use children, you know, to spread these messages. I was watching one documentary from the Family Watch International, and it was around cultural imperialism. And I'm like, okay, the people they basically presented, they are all young people. They say, oh, HIV killed my brother, HIV killed my parents, I'm like an AIDS orphan, you know, all of those narratives. And then they will say, you see, it's not like in the science that we can't find a cure for HIV, but these people are using HIV to introduce homosexuality, lesbianism, and all of those things. Now you are wondering, okay, fine, let's say the Westerners can't find a cure. We as Africans or Nigerians, can't we also now do our own part to find a cure? Did anybody tie the hands of our scientists to find a cure for HIV? If it's that easy, you know, so those are some of the narratives that is out there. And even in the recent social media sensation around the European Union and African Caribbean Pacific Agreement, the Samoa Agreement, you realize it's still around the whole, they are bringing in homosexuality subtly. It's a subtle way to legalize homosexuality. And you're like, are you literally saying people should be brutalized? Nigerian Human Rights Index is one of the lowest in the world, and everybody is interested in who is sleeping with who. Something a few years ago, youths were killed just because they were protesting. Was it because they were queer people? No. They were average Nigerians who were brutalized. And what did the government do? Nothing. And now we are trying to find frameworks that can protect people. and you are saying is homosexuality. So those are some of the things that they've been operating around. Sorry, I've been talking.
No, thank you. That was really enlightening, and it's interesting that you talked about the HIV management angle, because a lot of time when we talk about the ways in which anti-rights folks come in and penetrate, we tend to just talk about religion, but the HIV part is very important. Now, in the University of Lagos, although this signage is very washed out, when you enter the University of Lagos, there's a signage that is about HIV/AIDS, and it's supposed to say like prompts on what to do to protect yourself. And the only thing it says is abstinence is key, and something about keeping yourself for God or something. So it's very funny because my undergraduate studies, I did it in University of Lagos, even my graduate studies now there. And whenever I enter, it's washed out, right? And your eyes will not get to it. I always just look at it and ease. I will just I do it every time. I feel like whenever I ease at it, maybe it will go, but that's just what I just have to do. And it's very infuriating because this is a tertiary institution that should know better. Unilag is like first 500 in the world, in Africa. And that's the first thing that you are putting about HIV management. Like, what does religion have to do with HIV management? It's really shameful. I don't know if they end up seeing this on YouTube, but if you do, Unilag, please do better. So these are the ways in which, anti-rights activities coming, anti-right folks at their agenda. They use HIV and they, say we are coming to program. And what they go there to do is tell people, oh, abstinence because of this, and they come and bring in the Bible. But we know that as human beings, people will engage in sexual activities. Why can't we not give them the right resources to actually protect themselves instead of doing something that will not work? And your second point about, the West telling us about African values. It's very funny because a Westerner is coming to tell me, oh, African values, and I'm looking at you, no offense, and your pale skin, and you're telling me what is my African value. It's very always amusing. We were at the 77th session for the African Commission Human and People's Rights. And people are talking about African values, and all of the people carrying on these narratives are Westerners. And I'm like, what do you know about African values? What do you know about African values? We have, the penal code that the British brought up and all of that. For them to bring in a law, it means that something existed that you want to ban. So what it means is that these things existed, and you decided that no, this is not Western enough. Now, years later, you are coming to tell us about African values. But let me not get too into and just move on to our next question. Thank you so much, Godwin, for highlighting all of the ways in which anti-right agenda comes into the Nigerian society. So, hi, Elizabeth. So, my next question is for you. So, how can we as activists, from different movements, when we talk about anti-right issues, it's not a LGBTQI issue, it's not SRHR issue, it's not feminist movement issue, it's not environmental, climate. They are like all the human rights movements, disability rights, economic rights, and all of these movements. We are all human rights movements. So how can we, as activists from all of the different human rights movements, right? How can we collaborate effectively to counter the anti-rights agenda here in Nigeria?
Thanks for that question. I think Omolara answered made a good point about having solidarity. All right. Having that solidarity.
Can we all hear her?
Okay. All right. So forming
forming alliances from different movements is very important. This is better. Yes. Okay, so forming alliances, from the different movements, just like you mentioned, we have different rights and we have different human rights activists, across the country. So forming alliances would involve having different individuals with different expertise, resources coming together, having that common ground would enable us to speak in one voice, right? So we should look at how we can have different activists from different states in different areas, not just the LGBT, not just the queer persons, but every individual from different angles coming together, forming alliances, having one voice, speaking in one voice and engaging the media. We can engage the media, have different educational exchanges, because I might be an activist who knows a particular area but don't know in another area. So it would be an opportunity for me to also learn, while we are trying to speak in one voice, we are engaging in different educational exchanges, right? When we're able to do that, just like Clara said, when you have a room, the different streams will come together and make that whole point that we want to make in the country, and then we can use that opportunity as well to engage with the international communities, because we also have activists who are not even in Nigeria, who are Nigerians who are not living with us here, right? To also form that alliance and make that point that we need to make. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Elizabeth. And like you said, it's important that we come together and within all the movements. And a lot of the time, again, like Omolara mentioned, capitalism has made such a scramble with all of the work that we do, and we see activists scrambling. This movement is like, no, we don't want to collaborate with this movement because they are coming to take our money. Now, even within movements, you have the same scramble. There is always, this scramble, and it's causing us to divide and lack solidarity. It's like capitalism actually said, you know what, I know that if these people come together as a bunch of bros, they'll be powerful. So how can we put something in between? So they keep scrambling and just feel, it's like crabs in the bucket. You are just dragging the other person down because, there's that issue of, money, capitalism. And I think also in our context in Nigeria, again, it's because of the way we are in terms of our economy. A lot of people have to actually they want to survive first. They have to look for the next possible way to survive, to eat before they actually think of, joining movements. And it brings us to the conversation about funding. We know that funding plays a huge part in the cause of this solidarity. But if we can all, put all of this aside, like you have said, funding doesn't have to divide us. We can all come together for that same funding, right? We can work together because, again, like we have all said, the issues are unique to all of us. Human rights is being attacked, not just in Nigeria, in the world. And if we're not careful, as they come for different movements, everybody will be finished and there's nobody that will be left. So it's important that we all as activists within every movement that we are in, try to collaborate, not just activists, but organizations within which we work with, and see how we can actually push it further. I'm getting signal that we have to take it very fast, so please let me not just get caught up in the conversation because I can't talk. Okay, so my next question is for Jennifer, right? We're talking about intersectionality. In short, Dara said she has 4
recommendations for us and talks about intersectionality. And I think in recent time we have been talking about intersectionality as the word but not in action. In short, in the past 2 years, everywhere I've gone to is intersectionality, but I don't see it, right? So in what ways does intersectionality play a role in combating the anti-rights agenda? And how can activists ensure inclusive and intersectional approaches in the work that we do for human rights and the community?
Thank you so much. First, I would like to say that I'm quite honored to be here on this panel. And 2019, 2020, I was outside there as a volunteer. Yes, volunteer for TS for Symposium like this, yeah. So when we talk about intersectionality, Lara has actually said, almost everything. And while you were also saying something, you mentioned something around that, even though you did mention intersectionality as well. So when we talk about intersectionality, basically, it's like, recognition that there are diverse, groups within a main group. So for instance, for those who do not understand intersectionality, so let's say for instance, Jennifer is a girl, alright, and then, she's a person with disability. Perhaps she stays in a place where, women are not even regarded as, human beings. So just imagine that I, as a person, am embodying different identities and having, different experiences with my diverse identities, right? So now look at how we have movements, programming for queer people, and then you only focus on just queer person. Your programming approach is just one way. So you're not looking at the subgroups within the main group, right? So why am I saying this? I'm saying this because when we begin to analyze, social and policy issues from an intersectional lens, then everybody, no matter how small, are all, they come together to, create that one voice, that solid front to say, we are, this is who we are. And within that group, there are diverse people contributing their expertise, telling their stories, sharing their experiences, that is forming, that's one broom we're talking about. And when you say the broom, sometimes we have brooms in our houses. The brooms are not always long. There are some that are already broken, right? But then they still form a whole to do the work. Yeah. So we need to look at intersectionality as including the diverse group that we can easily overlook, right? It's very, very vital. And it's not just recognizing. I think that in the movement, we're quite lazy. I'm sorry.
Yes,
We're quite lazy when it comes to, recognizing these people, the whole, diverse groups. And then I hear people say, oh, it's expensive. How do I want to go about? There's no funding for that. But first of all, are you recognizing these people? Are you recognizing the groups of people, within the main group? So until we have that sense to say, that sense of approach, using the intersectional lens, I don't think we're going anywhere. And if we keep saying, so when you go to, maybe international conference, they're saying, leave no one behind. You have to start from your home, first of all.
Thank you.
You do not hold them accountable when you don't hold yourself accountable as well. So that's what I say.
Thank you so much, Jennifer. My panelists have been speaking today, and I just like all of the insights you have been giving us. And the example you made about not identifying other persons within the group. So you have subgroups. You don't. Okay, for example, let me just go straight to the point. LGBTQI plus movement. You see some people is GGGGGG plus, or is LLL plus, or is LGB. They remove the T, they'll do like this. So, and then when they want to apply for funding, you now write the LGBTQI plus. You get all of these things. And then it's not even just within the movement. Do we know that even queer people embody diverse identities? Do we think that queer people don't have disability or are not living with some sort of chronic illness that they have to manage? All of these things, we have to actually understand that within our community, right, within the LGBTQI plus community, that there are actually other identities that we cannot put aside because people don't leave their identities at home when they go out. They embody everything at every point in time. So I'll be moving on to our next question, which I'll just put out to Godwin. So what are the benefits and challenges of building alliances across diverse activist groups? And are there any successful examples you can highlight? Because we know that it's one thing to build alliances, but we know that there are challenges. So what are these challenges and what are the benefits? And if you have any successful examples you can give to us.
All right, thank you so much. So I think off the top of my head, one is the recent SSMPA challenge we had. It was a collaborative effort, and that was successful. Also, we've been, since 2015, Cheers has also been working with other partners, to collate human rights violations. Even the SSMPA case, one particular point that I would highlight that I really consider a success is the fact that we're able to work with National Human Rights Commission, having to get them on board to even sign an amicus, whether it was extremely positive or just neutral, is something, it's a win. And those are some of the case in point that has really happened. And I think also one thing that we must realize is there has been partnership even within the HIV programming. I am really impressed that they did a survey, to capture all the key population, transgender persons, you even see MSM, and it's a Nigerian survey. So for me, that's impressive because even though it might look like they restricted it to the number, but it's something. I've always said that if we could get ourselves to even have an estimated population of queer people in Nigeria, it becomes a thing that when we are going, we'll say, see, you are excluding 40 million Nigerians because you are feeling threatened about someone's private affairs in their own, which is really, so those are some of the challenges where you go to at the level of policy making. Nigeria is seen as binary, male and female. Even in the census that the government will be spending billions of naira, I'm sure they won't capture sexual orientation as part of the variable. They will just say male and female, So those are the challenges. So when at that level, there is no recognition. And I think another challenge that we don't often see as a challenge is the fact that Africa or Nigeria started from oral culture. And oral culture is where you transfer knowledge orally. There was no documentation of so many things and so many lived experiences of African people. And that's why when you now come, the white people will now tell you this is African value because they documented those things, So, and now it's even worse that we are no longer teaching history in schools. So it often baffles me. You said you are having to deal with cultural crisis, because basically Africa is as if we are dealing with cultural crisis. This one from the left will come and tell us, do this one, this is your value. The right will come and tell us, do this one, this is your value. So the challenge is, why is Nigeria or Africa the battleground for different ideologies and different perceptions to what we are supposed to be? So I think those are the challenges that we need to start working around to dealing with, having our own identity and speaking up about it, writing about it, so that we don't often read our challenges on the published article by Melinda, who is in the US, Even the Sorosoki that happened, a white person literally wrote a book about to say they formulated Sorosoki. So those are the challenges that you keep seeing within the movement, and those are some of the things that are robbing us that solidarity that we crave for.
Thank you so much for highlighting that, Godwin. We have to, come together and make visible our successes so that others who have not been in the struggle don't take over our successes. And also, even government institutions like the NHRC, they are also human rights defenders, and they fall into, human rights groups which we should build solidarity and collaborations with. So moving on now to Elizabeth. A lot of the times we have seen how anti-rights, perpetuate, violence via social media and offline. Recently, we saw where they mobilized children, I think in Lokoja, to come on the media to talk about queer rights and queerness invading African culture as a result of the European African contract that was to be signed, which Nigeria has not signed, that Godwin talked about. So I've seen all of these ways. So now, how can collaborative activism shape public perception and counter these negative narratives that are perpetuated by anti-rights groups? So how can collaborative activism, us all coming together from our various movements, how can we come to shape public perception? Because anti-rights groups are actually portraying another kind of perception. How can we come together to shape public perception and counter these anti-rights narratives that are being peddled around?
Thank you for the question. I think one of the things we would want to do is to start changing narratives from what we usually see or have. When I mean changing narrative, will be pushing out the positive narratives. What are we celebrating? I mean, we should celebrate our successes. Like this event that is taking place, we should celebrate it. I mean, the collaboration that has happened so far, you have mentioned NHRC, you have mentioned collaboration with police. These are things that we should be celebrating and be, pushing that narrative further. It goes beyond the relationship, it goes beyond the what we see online, right? So because what we see through the media forms the major part of the narratives that has been put forward. So one of the things we want to do is to change that narrative through the different media. So not just the online or social media, it also has to do with the mass media, right? Even goes on to using the flyers, the TVs, the radios, having podcasts, we have to change that narrative. Look at what individual activists have done, what we have done positively, how we are empowering people, how we are empowering even the young ones, changing that narrative from the negative, to the positive angle, Another aspect would be to engage, I know it's not easy, right, but looking at 10 years before now, we are not where we were. So whether we like it or not, our policymakers are listening. They are listening, right? And we have allies that may not come forward, but we speak with them behind the scenes. They talk for us on the tables where we cannot be there, right? And this, we tend to shift. Yes, we have cultural interference, we have religion interferences here and there, but I think these narratives start to move. And for us to form allies, we need to identify a common ground where we share values. I mean, sharing values and becoming respectful when we are presenting our cause. and move beyond being confrontational. Yes, we see all these negative narratives, but trying our best, not being confrontational to be defensive, but rather changing that narrative in a diplomatically manner, and positively pushing that. I think that way we will do better, in changing the narratives and forming more, getting more positive impact.
Thank you so much, Elizabeth, for that response. Diplomacy, advocacy, and solidarity is what we can be doing towards collaboration, towards, countering these anti-rights agenda in Nigeria. So we talk about, how can we strategize, how can we work together, how can we do all of these things. There's a lot of emphasis on activists and what activists should do, should not be doing, and sometimes there's not even time to talk about the activists themselves, because activists are people, they have emotions, they have mental health and all of that. So Jennifer, my question to you now is, given the challenges of combating, anti-rights agenda, how can activists prioritize self-care and build resilience individually and collectively? Are there any, support system or resources that are necessary, to sustain all of this?
Okay. Thanks very much. So I'd like to also state that I don't think we take mental health seriously in this country, and it's quite painful when you talk about mental health and people just think, they're already thinking of, the severe mental health issues. So now, there's always, so when you talk about mental health is one thing, mental health issues another. So there is always like, what's it called now? There's a confusion to say, oh, I don't have mental health, but we all have mental health, just like you have a physical health, right? But not all of us have mental health issues, because some of us prioritize our mental health, so we try to manage our health mentally so we don't have issues. And for activists and activism in the movement, I like to say that self-care is luxury that we all should, be able to, afford. It's a luxury we should afford. Normally, you don't have to struggle to say, oh, I can't take today off because, of course, capitalism again. So yes, I'll say that individually, we need to know when to say, oh, I've had enough. I need to pause. Because our predecessors, right, I don't think they understood the place of taking a pause so that the movement or the passion that they have for change can continue. So there was no, awareness to say, let me take a pause. So there's always the, oh, if I don't do this, please give me to that. We're actually here now, and they've done what they could do to bring us to where we are right now. And there are other people coming, after us as well, right? And I'll say you need to just know where to say, okay, I've had enough. To a professional mental health, practitioner, not just somebody who is a mental health practitioner and then do not even understand what they are doing, because we have that a lot in Nigeria. It's so much, and that's why most of us don't even seek help, because we don't. How do you want to understand what I'm saying when you also do not understand my issues, right? And collectively, I think we also need to hold space for one another as well. That's not something I see. I don't know if it's happening, but I don't see that. And we need to collectively hold space for us. I want to call Godwin, for instance, and say, oh, I'm having a rough day, and I just had this conversation with this person, a community member, and everything they've said to me is rubbing off of me, and I don't know how. I'm really having a hard time.
government can say, oh, I'm not in the right space right now to help you, but you can access these resources, right? So do we have these resources for activists in Nigeria? Do we have spaces where you can go to say, oh, I need to get help mentally and emotionally? So we don't have all of these things. So we need to start prioritizing our mental health and emotional well-being. We need to create spaces for activists to intentionally say, I've had enough and I need time to rest, and when I'm resting, I can access, this resources because they are available. And even if resources are available, for instance, can we afford these resources? Do we have money to say, want to pay a therapist to say, help me through whatever I'm going through? We don't have that. So it's as long as we don't have those things, we need to hold ourselves now. We are all we have. Collectively, hold spaces for one another when it comes to your mental wellness. You can call Omolara and say, Omolara, I've been seeing you doing so many things recently, in the family space. Are you sure you don't need rest? You're bringing Omolara's consciousness back to say, okay, I think I need to take a break right now, and take a pause and come back as well. So we need that collaborative accountability within the movement, and individually we need to know when to pause and then start again. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Jennifer. Being at the front line of, of the movement as activists and responding to issues and programming can take a whole lot of toll. So I just want to say for organizations, you don't have to wait until you have funding to actually safeguard the mental health of your staff, activists. You can always plan for that prior, because sometimes it's just a whole lot of toll that it takes on the mental health. So I'm going to just ask rounding up questions so we can just move on to the panel session. And I'll just go back to Godwin again to say that we have talked about all of the work that we do, collaboration, human rights, across movement, and all of that. But what efforts can be put into monitoring and documentation of human rights abuses, not just within prayer movement, but across movement? How can we come together to have some sort of unified documentation to actually further our work?
All right, I hope it's not because I'm in research. Okay, I think, I like using HIV programming as a very big example. So when you look at DHIS, which is the District Health Information System, it is one system that I like so much because it sort of harmonizes documentation of all that is happening within the HIV space in terms of programming. So I think we can adopt the same principle within the human rights space for everyone, like have an infrastructure that everyone could document the human rights cases, abuses, and then every organization feels like they own it. And how to go about that would be, DHIS came in through funders' interest. So we need to start as human rights organizations to start telling funders how we need a platform for documenting human rights violation. I'm very sure once funders say, hey, let's build a platform, both Tom and Dick and everybody will come together. But it feels like if Tears bring it up, the other organizations will say, Tears want to shine again. So they will now want to sabotage that very effort, So, but if it's, well, it's the capitalist that is dealing with everybody, but what can we say? But if we now have like a fund that actually come to propose it, I feel like both those who are in the mainstream human rights and those who are programming for queer people would want to come together. Say for instance, you see the case of the Bauchi that happened. Did you not see how NHRC responded because foreigners got involved? So those are some of the ways, that's one of the immediate way I think we can do it. Start speaking to funders that we need this, and then together with them co-develop a platform that can be used to document and someone can have access to it. like anywhere you are, you can just look at, I mean, data science and data engineering is already doing a lot. So we need to build data infrastructure that can be accessible to everyone and recognized. And one way is through funders. Funders will tell Nigerian government and it will happen.
Thank you so much. It seems like our solidarity is only gotten with funders. I hope that we can, try to, graduate out of that. But for the meantime, we can always, come together, pitch ideas to our funders and see how we can work together across movements. Because it would be great to have some sort of unified data across movement. Thank you so much, Godwin, for that. So Elizabeth, I'll be asking you this. You talked about how we can strategically and diplomatically engage, political leaders and legislators and all of that, right? So it now brings me to the question: how can we effectively engage non-traditional allies, such as religious and cultural leaders, to promote a more focused and inclusive agenda?
Thank you. I think involving cultural leaders or non-traditional allies, right, should be like the objective. So maybe our goal should be targeting the government. If we want to make a case or a cause, right, we need to target the government, because the government is in charge of everything. The government is in charge of, whether we like it or not, all of us here, we are all the government. I mean, according to economics, right, democracy is by the government. Is it government or democracy? It's government, okay. Democracy is for the people, by the people, and of the people, right? So we are the government, and then our leaders determine who we are, what we do, whether we like it or not. Our leaders determine that, and so that should be like the goal, while we work with the different categories of leaders, where we have the religious leaders, cultural leaders, all the leaders that we can talk about, right? And we need to have that balanced conversation when we are pushing for our rights as individuals, because as Nigerian or as Nigerians, we can't take away culture, we can't take away religion. These two form like the main aspect of our lives. And for religion, we have mostly Christians and Muslims. However, we have other religion, which is not common. But even within the Christian space, the diversity is there. Even within the Muslim space, we have that diversity. It's understanding these different diversities and understanding the values that these religious leaders can take from our cause. So whatever we are saying, they have to identify that common ground where both parties will identify with, and then work together towards. Because we need to build that trust, and like I said earlier, we need to begin to change that narrative. Because maybe I've been in a space, in a training where we discussed SOGIES. We usually call it the sexual diversity training then. And this was about 5 years or 6 years ago. And part of the conversation had to do with quoting the Bible. And the training overturned. Like, I think that was how we ended that session for that day. That was like 5-6 years ago. The facilitator brought up a Bible verse, and then one of the participants brought up another Bible verse, to counter that, and it didn't end well. But now, today, we can comfortably teach, educate participants, educate religious leaders on SOGIES without even causing the uproar, right? We've tried to find that balance. Yes, there might be change, because I know There's this recent training we had, and one of the participants, I think, chatted with another of his colleague. How did I get to know? The colleague told me, that, oh, this participant that we invited said you people are teaching us how to. Well, if that is the narrative at that point, the bottom line is that that individual who was part of the training had learned something, right? The change might not come immediately, but the change will definitely come. So as long as we find that common ground, we keep saying, we keep talking, we keep educating our religious leaders, whether they listen or they don't listen. Believe you me, they listen. They see what is in the space, in the media, right? They see it and they go back to think about it. And that's how change will happen, right? So when we begin to talk about it and have that middle ground, identify those allies that, based on their experiences, based on their viewpoints, you can identify that this individual is kind of tilting towards what we are talking about, and we keep pushing, further. I think at that point we will meet up our end goal, which is actually influencing, the policies, to the positive aspects.
Thank you so much, Elizabeth, for that one. Like you said, it's very important to engage with more traditional allies, religious leaders, and traditional leaders, cultural leaders. You can see what happened in Ghana with the influence of the Archbishop of the Catholic Church, when he came on the national TV to say that the Ghana anti-homosexuality bill should not be, because it should not be criminalized, and all of a sudden that has had some sort of impact in the bill's tenor and effectiveness in the parliament. We are just looking out to see what happens now. So my last question is for Jennifer, and let's just wrap this round and then move on to question and answer. Please, if you have any questions, just prepare it. We'll be taking just a few questions because we are short on time. So Jennifer, so to round up, we talk about like our work, activities, and all of that, and it seems like a lot of us are not so much at the grassroots anymore. So how can grassroots initiatives? How can we initiate grassroots ideas as well as work with organizations that are the grassroots? So how can grassroots initiatives, contribute to bringing and building an informed society that is inclusive of human rights for like all the vulnerable groups and marginalized groups? Okay, so how can grassroots initiatives that we as mainstream human rights organizations bring up, as well as grassroots organizations, so how can these initiatives contribute to building a society that is informed on human rights, not just mainstream human rights?
Okay, so I believe that grassroots initiatives, they're quite very vital and significant to education when it comes to educating, members of the community at the grassroots level. So when I say education, so sometimes we think people know, right? And for instance, mainstream human rights organizations might not have the time to say, oh, let me go back to the grassroots and educate members of that community, or all the diverse communities, to say, let's educate them on this and this and that, on human rights, right? So the grassroots initiative now they have the opportunity to carry community members along, educate them on different human rights, to say, you have this right, this is where it is, Education is actually very key when it comes to what grassroots initiatives can do. So, and I'm also looking at appreciating the ideas of community members at the grassroots level. So we've talked about collaboration, across movements, solidarity across movements. So one major thing again that I believe that grassroots initiatives can actually do is have an open, like an open policy. I don't think it's a policy, like an open space where individuals at the grassroots level can come up with ideas that we think, can help solidify the movement, and we have like united front. Of course, we're trying to fight against the anti-right agenda, and then we know that the grassroots initiatives are quite also significant to achieving these goals, right? So you need to allow for individuals to bring up ideas, have an open space, allow them own the ideas and we work together, have a spirit of collaboration, because we can't even if we move higher, to anywhere in this world, we still need a grassroots initiative, to educate our members in the community, because I believe that sustainable change will not come from the top down, it's come from the ground up. So yeah.
Thank you so much, Jennifer. It's important that as we go higher, we don't lose sight of communities at the grassroots. Have an open door policies, engage with grassroots community members in your different movements. Let them come together regularly. What are the ideas? How can we document them? And how can we put this into practice? Thank you so much to my panelists, and thank you for all your insights. At this point, I'll move to the audience. Do we have any questions for this panel? We'll just take a few questions. Any questions or contributions? Okay, please go ahead.
So, I got a question earlier, and it says, in what ways can technology and digital platforms be leveraged to disseminate information and resources for HIV prevention while countering anti-right narratives?
Thank you so much. What's your name, please?
My name is
Olaoluwa, thank you. So, he's asking what ways can we utilize technology to disseminate, sorry, English is hard, disseminate, resources and information about HIV and STI management, right? So I'm throwing the question to my panelists. Anybody want to pitch in? I know we said a few things about that already. You can just briefly go.
All right, so I think I'll just pick this one. So one important thing we have to bear in mind is technology is still the same medium the anti-right groups are using to share the negative perceptions. So the same way they are doing it. I mean, when I was watching that cultural imperialism documentary, it was a 35 minutes documentary, and I saw how they dug deep down to information, scientific articles that were published long time ago, and they just take it, share and say so doctor said this, and then they now use the buttress and say, you see what we are talking about. So the same way they are doing it, we also need to be digging deep, digging deep to find evidence. For instance, where women marry wives. Those are some of the cultural things the languages that represent queerness in African languages. We need to start bringing it up. The times they were first created, when they were spoken, the culture that spoke about it. So we basically show it and say, you see, so King Danfu or whatever. I've forgotten that guy's name in the north. Usman Danfodio said this. So that people begin to draw attention to say, oh, okay, if Yandandu was said during Usman Danfodio, it means these things were happening, So we need to start bringing out those buried evidence. When we are creating, say, you want to talk about HIV, you can bring out evidences how HIV has not just been killing queer folks alone, but also how HIV has been killing the general population, how it drops from so percentage in the general population to where it is now at 1.2 or 1.6. We need to show how that movement happened and what strategies were used, to bring it down to that point. And then now say, you see, that is higher now is just as a result of neglect. It's not because somebody is square, that's why HIV is more in that population, rather is neglect. And I think another point I would also draw is within the social media space, they are not just, even amongst our celebrities, they are sharing classism. You just see elements of how people are saying, if you are living in this area of Lagos, you are in trenches. And then and all of those things, it feels like it's a very harmless thing. But until you begin to realize that it affects your daily, your daily life. For instance, I stay in the mainland, in Moshi to be precise. When I'm working from home, if I want to order pizza, once I order, I have my money to pay, but the driver will say, no, we don't come that side. And you see, those are some of the ways, just by me saying this place is trenches, could affect somebody's livelihood. And those are some of the ways that we within the movement can start sharing. Bring those buried evidence. Who were the first people that sort of brought in HIV in Nigeria? Bring it. If the person, because it's not only queer people that have died, so we need to just start highlighting evidences and not just create documentary casually as if we are here for play. Because these other guys are not playing. Like sometimes when you finish watching, you say, wow, brilliant. Like literally until you tap yourself, say, come on. Because they are bringing evidence that you will start questioning why you are even doing what you are doing. So we need to also start questioning them. Thank you.
Thank you so much. So I just want to add to Godwin's comments. Yeah, so we can't overemphasize the essence of research. Research is very important, and unfortunately, currently, we are fully, or how do I say, majorly donor funded. So I think when we begin to think outside the box, think outside the donor's expectation of what is HIV prevention, we can comfortably use the different technological means. There are different technological means that we can use to access HIV prevention beyond just HIV messaging. When we talk about PrEP, for example, which is a pre-exposure prophylaxis, we are still dependent on what the donor is giving to us. So when this PrEP, for example, is not available, what happens? What happens when there is no funding for disseminating information? These things, again, that's capitalism, right? We're talking about money, right? So what can we do internally? What can we do beyond donor funding to say we want to, push HIV prevention messages, push HIV prevention intervention, to all our community members, beyond what donor expects? Because what happens currently is we are only relying on what donor says. Donor says, go this way, we go. Go this way. So when we begin to look internally, we source for resources, not just money, resource for individuals, expertise, doctors, nurses, mental health consultants, skit makers, we have different, look at the different diversities, right? In terms of the resources, human resources, and then when we come together, we will be able to go beyond what the donor wants us to do. We will be able to reach out to more individuals, because there are also some individuals who do not even want to associate themselves with the donor's funding. Let me put it that way. There are some individuals who can actually buy PrEP. They can buy PrEP for even 100 persons. Have we been able to find such individuals to help other community members? So I think these are the areas we may want to look at, while wanting to improve HIV prevention amongst our community. Thank you.
Okay, very quickly, I'd like to add to what my fellow panelists have said. So you talked about technology and innovation. So I know that when we talk sometimes, we mention we need to use the media, and we cannot rely on the mainstream media, right, to shape our narrative and represent us the way we need to be represented. Now we have technology
which has presented us with social media, right? We have the full power to utilize social media to create the narrative that we want. So when the anti-rights movement, or if they are pushing narrative using the social media, we also bring out counter narrative using that same means. But now we have younger people who are actually, they have the skills and knowledge on how to use social media. We have social media ads. We can tailor our narratives, break it down in language that people will understand, and then push it out there. So I mean that's also another way. Thank you.
Thank you so much, everybody. Unfortunately, we'll be taking only that question. We'll take the rest after the next panel. So thank you so much to my panelists for honoring us with your presence and your insights. We'll just take a picture before we leave the stage.
No, it's fine.
How do we feel after that first panel? I hope we're all buzzing with information and action points that we're going back to our respective homes and workplaces to implement. So just writing off the energy of the first panel and the keynote speech, I would like to introduce our second panel for the day, and then our panelists. So I'll just read this brief. So the panel topic is called Strategic Resistance Tactics for LGBTQIA plus movement building. And this discussion would be focused on examining and discussing strategic resistance tactics essential for fostering the growth and strength of the LGBTQIA plus movement in Nigeria. Esteemed panelists will analyze and share effective strategies, innovative approaches, and tactical methods that propel the movement forward despite the challenges and oppositions faced. So I'll just leave the rest of this text because it's more or less the same thing we discussed in the first panel in a different font with different people that have different expertise. So without further ado, I would like to invite Precious Harry to the stage. Precious Harry is a passionate filmmaker dedicated to telling stories that educate, uplift, and inspire change. She is also an LGBTQI plus rights activist who strives to promote inclusivity and authenticity through storytelling and advocacy, and maybe a few blows here and there, just if she doesn't support violence. Then our next panelist is Suru Emmanuel, who is a human rights activist and feminist ally from Benin Republic. He possesses a deep understanding of intersectional advocacy, SRHR, sexual and reproductive health rights, and the varied issues faced by the LGBTIQ plus community. With a background in project management, Suru works in promoting transnational collaboration between Francophone and Anglophone West African communities, intergenerational solidarity, capacity strengthening, and inclusion of young independent activists in the West African LGBTIQ plus advocacy space. Please, let's thank you. Then our final panelist is Omolara Oriye, who is a lawyer and decolonial. Right, okay, you met her, you heard from her. Okay. Welcome everyone. Thank you so much for being on our panel. So because we don't have a lot of time, we'll just go right into it. And I've had to reorder the questions because, like I said, the first panel and the second panel more or less have the same word. We're really just focusing on building alliances for strengthening human rights movements anyway. So based on that, my first question will go to Omolara. It was going to be a different order, but yes, go. All right. Okay. Omolara, reflecting on the changes in the LGBTQIA plus movement over the past decade, what strategies for movement building, advocacy, and resisting anti-rights efforts have you found to be particularly effective?
Okay. From reflection, I have found that having a North Star, that is like, last week I was in a meeting where somebody said the words North Star, and I was like, yes, that is so good for like strategic advocacy to have like that goal. I realized that a lot of us program rather than do activist work. I understand, the essence of programming and all of that stuff, but we also must recognize that the NGOization of liberation has really impacted the kind of response, the kind of work that we are capable of doing. So the idea of programming is interesting. It allows for, say, organizing your advocacy. But are we really reflecting and looking at what we're doing and realizing that programming is not working? Right? Because programming requires you to kind of, identify this, and as well as the programming is not working, I mean programming in the way that, is people do it, the way they are expected to do it. As little as you create an entire program and the communities that you're programming for are not involved in the origins of that program. They don't know anything about it. I realized that I've been in many spaces where activists are speaking lately, and I realized that many activists say things like, we have to go to the rural areas, and I'm like, you cannot describe the relationship to the land for indigenous people. They know how to live their lives. We know how to do our things. We have our own ways of doing things. We shouldn't be preoccupied with teaching people in those spaces the things that we think we have learned from the cities, but rather understand and support communities to create their own priorities and then fulfill those priorities. Now, if that is what we are calling programming, okay, maybe I get it. But what we call programming right now is developing a few programs from our offices, from wherever we are, or from meetings with donors, and then we create a work plan, and then we treat communities like, we also use the word beneficiaries, right? And then we treat communities like just receivers, like people who don't have agency. Whereas folks do have agency. Let me tell you, I used to program like that too. But it's been a decade and we've learned more. So we must use that new knowledge to kind of like chart the course. So for example, the reason I mentioned the North Star is because I believe that in whatever work we do, the community is that North Star. Like the community is where it begins and ends at or with. And the community is not just LGBT people. I'm talking about all the people within those spaces, including you and I. We all belong to communities, we all belong to spaces like that. So when I think about my experience, is that there is a need for a shift in how we do the work. Now, if you develop programs in your office and you do all of the things that you need to do, you are still doing good work because at least you're really thinking about people and you're contributing. But in some cases, we complicate the issues for people that, people that we call beneficiaries, which are not beneficiaries, which we can just call communities, right? And we realize that sometimes we end up maybe doing harm than good. I've seen cases, this morning it dawned on me that I've been in this space for 9 years. I'm like, I didn't know. I thought it was like last 2 years or something, But if we think about like the idea that people have agency, they know who they are, and we program as such. So for example, we've done work in the past where we say, oh, we're going to go into that community, and then we get to the community and realize that this is what they need. And then sometimes we succeed at what do you call the English? Rechanneling and replanning and all of that. Sometimes we don't. When we don't, we unfortunately leave people behind. And that's really something that we want to tackle with the way we advocate going forward. So in my reflections, I think one of the biggest things that I've learned is that no matter the work we're doing, no matter what we're trying to do, the people come first, the people come last. It must begin with the people, it must end with the people. Because the NGOization, or people call it the institutionalization of human rights, or our liberation makes it look as if there is levels, right? As if because probably you live in an urban area or this or that, you're suddenly better and you have more exposure and all of that. But Western education is not the exposure that everybody needs. Like, we all are exposed. Like, your reality, being exposed to your reality is exposure. You don't have to have been to Amsterdam or this. I said Amsterdam because a lot of people love it, Amsterdam. Right? You don't have to have done anything peculiar like that, because understanding your worldview gives you authority over that reality. And being treated as if you are less than is not fair. And unfortunately, the work that we do as activists end up making people feel like they're less than. But I know that that's not why we do it. That's not, we don't want to do that. But we don't have the luxury of those kind of mistakes. We have to keep it in mind. So number one, community, centering the community. Don't ever plan another program that doesn't begin with understanding what the core needs of whoever you're going to implement the program for. So let's imagine you're in your office and you realize, oh, maybe people in this area of town have a challenge, right? You have seen the problem, but it's not in your place to advocate on that problem until you get the buy-in of that community. So go there and find out what the key issues are. Number two is that we need to understand that we will not get our liberation from, sitting on the sidelines and watching what we say and watching what we do. Marginalized peoples across the world are tone police. I'm a woman. I have 3 to 5 degrees in experiencing tone policing, because I'm a woman who says whatever the hell I feel like saying. I feel like you shouldn't have said it like that. I'm like, but the message though. But I get the message, but you should have said it, no? Right? So when it comes to marginalized people, it's not just about what we say, it's also about the hows, and also about the whys. And how do we deepen our position in terms of saying what we mean? By research, by expanding our horizons, by understanding, like the world around us, by being able to connect multiple issues, right, together. So for example, even though you do LGBT work, it's not just LGBT work, right? I remember one of my stints as ED at Tears. I call it a stint, which was about a year. And I was like, no. It's hard work. Well done, sir. And I remember at that time, we had a donor who said, well, we want to do human rights training post NSADs. And I'm like, I'm sorry. I cannot train anybody. People are homeless. What is it about train homeless people? I will not match and go there and say, it's not right. It's not. And the donor was actually quite responsive, and they were able to flip that project, and they were able to actually sort out people's immediate needs. Those are that's kind of work that we should do, the work that actually elevates community. Not for us to stand on that tiny high. I know I'm saying a lot of really hard things, but let's manage. Not stand on that high horse that NGOization has provided us. Because it's a thing. You become privileged and then you start seeing differently. But keeping our sights on the key things, ensuring that our work is not doing harm. And how can we ensure that? By ensuring that our work begins and ends the community. Number two, by ensuring that the needs that we say we are responding to are actually the needs of the people. Right? And thirdly, by understanding that we do not stand alone. LGBT rights don't exist in a vacuum. It is interconnected, it is interrelated with every other, right. And you see, the mainstream human rights groups that used to act fresh and say, but it's a complex issue. Now, all of them are lying that they know LGBT people in their proposals. So let them come and walk the talk, drag them out. Right? Because we realize that many donors are now saying, oh, we won't fund, groups that are anti. Because how can you be anti other groups? we understand that there are social challenges in terms of like coming, I don't want to say coming out, but as an ally, you don't come out, you kind of like just do the right thing, right? And people are afraid to do what is right because of backlash, because of whatever those things are. But it's time for us to kind of like stand, firm, and I'm talking to allies now, because our issues are really genuinely interconnected. We may not have the same material problems, but we have the same oppressors. And we have the same system of structural inequality. So you may be rich. I always say to people, like, middle class people are the most, they're on like thin ice, right? Because you can enter Uber and you are going from point A to point B. If push comes to shove, you don't know how to trek. I'm not joking. You don't know how to pass back roads from Bagada to this side, to that side. So when they want to eat the rich, you are the ones that they will find on the road, because the really rich people are inside private jets. So class solidarity should not be toward the upper class. Your class solidarity should be amongst one another. And when I say amongst one another, it's with the reality that all of us are one mishap away from GoFundMe. So, instead of you to align your solidarity with the rich and powerful, we must build solidarity amongst ourselves, so that we can build people power. We can build a formidable movement that can stand in the face of oppression. Because look, oppression is not going to end. So as long as there's resources in the ground, our rights are going to be politicized. Thank you.
The way this answer has encapsulated everything that we are trying to talk about today, your focus as an activist, as a person, as a community person, should be the community you're programming for, not your funders' requests, not your resources that are limited. What are the needs of the community and how can we meet them? Okay, we have limited resources. Okay, who can we work with that has half? Let's bring half, you bring half, you bring half. And then you meet the needs of the community as best as you can, making sure that the community is represented in the room as you are planning. But then, you find that a lot of the time when we talk about intersectionality and being inclusive and all of that, people start to talk about the limitations, like Jennifer mentioned, and that why Jennifer said that we tend to be lazy. So Emmanuel, I'd like to ask, your work focuses on fostering collaboration, solidarity, and inclusion of young independent activists in the LGBTQI advocacy space. In your experience, what are some tactics we can use to better include and center marginalized communities in LGBTQI plus advocacy? That is by circumvent the excuses that we normally have in order to strengthen the movement.
Thank you. So we as activists need to understand that the power of advocacy lies in authentic voices, and our voices and efforts count in the work we do. And we also need to understand that you as a person do not have to be affiliated to an institution or organization to be an activist. It is very important for us to promote representation and visibility for upcoming activists, people who are passionate about the work we do, and persons who really want to put in the work. And also, we look at it from the lenses of intersectional approach to the advocacy work we do. It's very important because over time people have had series of conversations around oppressive, authoritarian strategies to leadership in the Nigerian, human rights and LGBTIQ space, right? So at the moment, we have a pandemic of organizations springing up everywhere. The last time I checked, it was 133, yes, organizations in Nigeria. So it is very important we promote intergenerational solidarity between seasoned and upcoming activists, and we let these people know you do not have to start an organization to put in the work, because there's a lot of mismanagement when it comes to resources that's been allocated to our community, and we are not holding people accountable for how they manage these things. You understand? That's why we have a lot of persons who just wake up and say,
I want to start under the Mango Tree Initiative. Yes. So it is very important, and part of the thing I do, one of the things I'm very passionate about is I am very interested in spotlighting the fact that, you know, I started from nothing and I'm where I am at the moment. You know, I've been in spaces where, you know, I spoke both locally and regionally, and I also want people to understand that you do not have to start an organization. You really do not need to get funding from a funder to do the work you do. You know, there's power in our collective effort. You can collaborate. I've done a lot of collaborations with organizations over time. So it's very important for upcoming activists to collaborate, you understand, and also contribute to the work existing activists and institutions does. That's what, you know, building solidarity is, because we really need to understand that and ask ourselves the question of, why are we doing the work we do? Are we doing the work we do because we want to get paid, or because there's a gap and we're working towards filling the gap? And we are quite passionate about the work and effort we put into the different strategies and procedures we as activists do. And it is very important to understand that just similarities in our struggles as LGBTIQ persons, the fact that culture, religion, tradition, and the anti-gender movement, which is fully funded, is against our existence as queer people in Nigeria. That's one of the reasons why we do the work we do. So even for community members who are not activists, we really need to understand that you cannot use propaganda to demand accountability. Yes, you cannot use propaganda to demand accountability. So it's high time we start demanding for agency and spaces where we come together and talk about the very issues we are faced with. Because our unity and solidarity is what would make us achieve whatever freedom we intend achieving as activists and a community in Nigeria. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Emmanuel. Absolutely, we do have to demand for agency, even in spaces, and make sure that the people that we are programming for, also their agency is being respected and upheld as we carry on. So this leads me to my next question for Precious, which also is bordering on inclusion, but specific to your field as a passionate filmmaker, human rights activist. The systemic erasure of people belonging to marginalized communities ensures that people who are LGBTQIA+ and people with disabilities are not represented or are misrepresented entirely. How do you navigate this system to ensure that the communities being obscured by design are the ones that you represent and amplify through your work?
Thank you, Alex. I wanted to say, if there's a person with disability in this gathering, can they please raise their hands? So that's where we're starting the conversation from. Even in our gatherings, we do not take cognizance of the fact that these are members of our community, people who should be in our gathering. In the course of my work, I'm currently in post-production for a documentary for persons with disability who are also LGBTQI persons. And when I got to Calabar, I discovered an entire community of people who were dumb. I mean, I met like 10 of them, gay men, dumb. I'm like, okay, it's a lot. And I'm like, what do I do with these people? There are many. They come together on Sundays, they hang out, they play, they talk, they go to church, they sing, and they teach. I went to their school, and when I got to the school, I saw an entire community of nobody cares about your sexuality. We only see you as a person. And one thing I have found out is that we are lazy. I take that word from, Jennifer. And when she said that, I was like, hell yes, we are. Because we want to sit down here and do the work without going out there to, meet with the people, without going out there to say, what do these people need? And in talking to them, one thing that was paramount was, these people don't need our pity.
They don't need, we use persons with disability, even in our community, to fill up quotas. To be like, oh, disability people gave me funding, so I have to find one person and put them on this chair. And that one person is enough. And for us, that is inclusivity. I am sorry or not sorry to say that we are not inclusive as a community. Whether it is with persons with disability or all other things, right? We are always doing it's my thing. We are quick to fill up quotas. Unless we shot a documentary, you were in that documentary, and they used me to fill up the crew quota. Yes. Every time someone will say, is your sorry, your crew, are you quite inclusive? They will say, yes, precious. We have a meeting with someone this morning, so you have to be in that meeting. And I'm sitting there and they're like, oh, and then when they talk up to the LGBT part, they're like, okay, you're cute. Go ahead and talk. You know, it messed with my mental health. I was like, what is this? But they got this huge funding from the Canadian government, which I don't have. And they were working in our community. I was doing almost, all the getting people from my community to work and everything. But I saw where they are coming from, even with the questioning. It was a lot for us in that work. And so for me, I would say that we have to be more inclusive. And when I go to shoot, currently I've been shooting for a lot of organizations. And one thing I find out, why wait for your funding to almost run out before you engage the film consultant? How do I carry out extensive research, meet with the communities that I'm filming, get everything that we need to get for this project? It's because you do not care. And I'm sorry to say it, but can we care a little more? That is how we can be inclusive. And that is what I use. The community of persons with disability that I built, or that I now have, is because I traveled to each and every one of them. I met them in their homes, with their people, with their families. I got to be with them. So they check on me. Oh, how are you? Have you eaten today? And I'm like, oh, I'm fine. Try and get some rest. Why do we have that? Because I could send a cinematographer to go there and film and send that clip to me. I don't need to travel. My body is breaking. But I travel a lot because I want to get first-hand information. So when it comes to the role of media, every day we say the media has work to do. Who is the media? What is the agenda setting? We talk in school, they will tell us that there's the agenda setting hypothesis of the media, which means, oh, does the media set the agenda or the people and all of that? But we all know, how many of you have seen polls? How was your acceptance or your relationship with trans people before you saw polls? How was your understanding of the HIV movement before you saw polls? All of these things are things that we can do. When you say you are a person living with HIV now, you will see reactions. Even amongst us, we act like, oh, it's okay, but it's not okay. You act like it's one hell of a big thing. So what are we doing as people? Because, again, in this documentary that we shot, I needed a translator. I started to learn sign language. I picked up a little here and there. Because that is how we can be inclusive. How many of us know sign language? How many of us takes it like, oh, in this organization, what if a person comes in and they need to access care? Who will attend to them? In Port Harcourt, Sifi, you have a lot of those people in your community. And I'm shooting these two boys very soon. I mean, these people are out there. And nobody is reaching out. Even when they access care, it is hard. If they cannot speak English, then everything has ended. Because now they have to type on their phone and show it to you. You look at it, then you know what they want. So it is hard. We went to film this one, and a lady was saying, fine boy like you, why you know they hear? I'm like, okay, what am I going to do with this? But this is what even people in our community do. So we need to tell these stories. from a human angle. We need to tell these stories from a place of love and care. We need to know that these are people, our people, who we have to stand in the gap for. Thank you.
Amazing contribution so far. Thank you so much, Precious. Absolutely, we do need to, because the erasure is systematic and it is by design. So we then, as individuals, have to go the extra mile and circumvent these systems and not just stay where we are and say, oh, wow, damn, we can't, oh no, you know? And so we mentioned a lot about funding. I'm very happy to see that we are talking more about like collaboration and pulling resources together, individual resources, as opposed to donor funding and all of that, because there are a lot of constrictions. So Lara, can you share with us, like, how can we move beyond funding constrictions and resource limitations toward a more well-rounded and inclusive LGBTQIA plus movement that is responsive to the specific needs of the Nigerian community?
Yeah, I love the conversation around moving away from donor, because you're not going anywhere. Nobody's moving anywhere. You know why we're not moving? Because that's how, it's not a mistake that the donor is central to the liberation work. It is that it is designed so that this excess money that billionaires have, they can use it to give you so that they can exert indirect control on your realities. So I think one of the things I had to do in the last few years was come to terms with all of this. Like, yes, we are the activists, yes, we are, but there are things that we need to come in contact with and like just make peace with. So when I think about like, funding the movement, we will fund the movement through care, through nurturing, through solidarity. One of my least favorite things within our work, within the space, is the culture of like classism, and I don't know how to say it without offending my gaze. So there's like I have a recurring memory in my mind in the days where I used to go from police station to police station, and all of that stuff. One random evening, somebody invited me to a gathering at I can't remember the name of that place, it's on VI or whatever. So we went there, and it was actually a really nice evening. And then I looked across the room, and somebody, was fat shaming me right there. And it was very apparent. I know this person very well. I know, like I wasn't shocked. I wasn't like unsure of what was going on. So me, I don't sense sometimes. I want to confirm that you're truly talking to me. So I confirmed, and I was like, wow, this is unfair. I actually felt really slighted. Like, I thought we were like in community. We do this thing where in our minds we align with different factions of society because they are aspirational. And I get that we all should have aspirations. However, there is a reality that we need to grapple with. It is that we are nothing without one another. So I'll talk about money in like 2 minutes, but how are we funding each other with care, nurturing, and solidarity? How I hear that dating as a gay man is like, I'm not saying anything about women because we know our own. Like hetero women are like, they're just like, those one wants to hug them every time you see them. But like, and these things, I know it seems really like fun or cool or funny, but it all forms a part of your worldview. Your type is not an imaginary thing you came with from heaven. It sits in your biases, in what you consider worthy, in what you consider beautiful. And those ideas of what you consider beautiful, what you consider worthy, are steeped in white supremacist standards. So you will never like yourself, and because you don't like yourself, you will not be able to like your fellow people that look like you, that live like you. Because many times when and I don't even know why, now I must say that the Spirit is leading me to speak about like community instead of like money. Because I just plan to talk about this, I don't even like talking about it. However, you find, right, that because of, when you think about like your colonial relics of how we behave, we can see the visible ones in like our economy, we can see it in like our cultural practices. But the one that we don't really think about is the intellectual, sociological aspects of these things, right? Where the things you consider beautiful are things that you cannot access, aka whiteness. You cannot aspire to whiteness because no matter what you do, your ass is black. People are everywhere. It can't be anything. Has been, will be, in all of these spaces in the world. So first things first, we need to start thinking about nurturing one another, contributing to one another's lives. And I don't mean become best friends or whatever. I mean in the way you treat other people. In the way you treat worldview. We need to nurture each other by interrogating our worldview. In terms of nurturing the community, as far like money, funding, I think that there is a need to place like a higher task on donors, because remember that money doesn't belong to them. It belongs to billionaires who are looking for tax breaks. No, we know where the money is coming from. Right? So those monies should be able to move better into communities through, whoever is. And I love what you said about like individual activists. I think that a lot of us will not be able to build effective movements within NGOs. I don't think that NGOs are established or primed to be able to solve that problem of movement building. It is people who will put their bodies on the line. People were here during NSAS. Which NGO was murdered? None. It was people who put their bodies on the line for our liberation. And so it is important to nurture activists who don't belong to an NGO. I'm going to say two things and drop the mic. One, you said something, I wrote it down, that, people, I'm coming, give me a second. Yeah, I wrote a note here that it's okay to want to get paid for your labor. A lot of mindsets that people come into this space, we all had it, because we thought we're like just these special human beings who are just like Assistant Jesus is, who are just so great, and but it's a white supremacist rhetoric, because these people get paid. Have you ever emailed your donor before? It's like, I'm in the Bahamas until next month. For you're in Granada, waiting. Right? So it's important to get paid for your labor, because you live in a capitalist world. You know what? Every time I think about that, I think about like the Bible. You know that thing where it says you're of the world, not of the world. As activists here, you are not of this capitalism world, but you do live in a capitalist world. One thing that we must not lose is our soul, because when it comes to like the idea around chasing money, everything is on the table. You have to ask yourself, what is the cost? Right? So I don't ever tell people that, don't get paid for your labor. No. The reason why we have situations that you've spoken about, where people mismanage funds or redirect funds into their own pockets and stuff like that, is because of the dishonesty around the money. if we're not dishonest about money, and we don't expect to save people, because the only person you can save is yourself. We are not in this job, in this work, to save people. We are here to, to do labor, because it's a skill. You're not just, which of you got hired in your NGOs by just being a human being? Did you not bring your certificates? These are the truths that we need to start telling each other. If you got that job, then you must be compensated for that job, because you're going to need to take care of yourself. Abi? However, on the other side of that is the ethos. Why do you do what you do? So we are not single, let me just quote Audre Lorde again. We are not single issue people. Our lives are complex, well-rounded, having all sorts of dynamics just happening within us. And so we shouldn't treat ourselves in this work like that. You're not going to be available every day. You're going to be sick, you're going to be down mentally, you're going to be exhausted, you're going to be all of those things. Well, it is the community we build around ourselves that comes into play in those times. So lastly, how do we shift from, donor-centered advocacy? It's by creating alternatives, right? Alternatives, not necessarily money. I know some people do endowment funds now. So let me give an example of like a sustainability fund, maybe not an endowment fund, but an endowment fund is also important. So when you think about a sustainability fund, is that from every money that your organization gets for whatever purpose, there is a percentage that goes into like your storage. So that in the days that things are difficult, for example, remember when we used to have arrests back in the day, and we will not have any money for arrests. Like something has happened, you need money to go to the station. But if you look at your books, you cannot, for good conscience, remove money, because how are you going to report that to the donor? So things like that, saving for the rainy day, right? Well, that's so cliche, but it's what it is. Starting a sustainability fund for people who run NGOs, very important. Starting an endowment fund for people who run medium to large, organizations, very important. And accountability is another thing I want to share. So accountability is not about, oh, that person, they bought Ferragamo slippers, how could they afford it? I don't institute myself as a gatekeeper for billionaires and all of that stuff. However, you must be accountable to your community. Because without accountability, there can't be trust. And without trust, we can't build movements where we nurture each other with care. If I'm thinking in my mind that Alex's watch costs this particular thing, and that makes me resentful of them, there is no way we can build solidarity together in the work. Right? So I really do believe that, apart from funding, of which I do believe that funding must flow better. One of the things that we must do in our work is to look at donors, look at the philanthropic space, and remove those colonial power dynamics that continue to perpetuate, subjugation and imbalance. We should do that, because philanthropy will. I asked the question a couple of months ago at a webinar, like, what's our wildest dreams of philanthropy? And somebody said for philanthropy to end. And I was like, yes. No, I totally get that dream. Because that means that we now live in an equal world, where we are all, we are able to put two things on the table and get it back. Nobody's exploiting us. But until we get to that point, we're going to need philanthropy. And whilst we are on that journey, philanthropy needs to become accountable to the communities as well. It's not a power from the top model, no. You also have to be, accountable to communities. So as activists, who kind of find ourselves in the middle, because sometimes you are the connector between communities and philanthropists. You're like, it's like this. There's one side, you are the one moving on the spectrum. It's a difficult job, both as an individual activist, as being in an NGO, doing whatever, even for researchers, for all of us who are in this labor together. It's not an easy job to do. But I know that with nurturing, with care and letting go of aspirations to like oppression. So a lot of people don't want to be free because they want to be free. They want to be free so that they can oppress others. You can see an example of that in the world. So many examples everywhere. Now, I do believe that everything boils down to our individual interactions. If you cannot fix here, you cannot fix here, you cannot fix here. So, last point, introspection. You have to understand why you think the things you do. Why do you like the things you like? Right? The other day I was watching a video of one of the last children. And I was like, wow, it's so hard to have empathy for rich people. You know, she was just so sweet and you couldn't even fault them. But that's what happens with class. Right? And so we all aspire to that just sweet. But then does our reality support that? And should we oppress one another on the journey to that place? So like I really wish I could say it's just about like decentering donors or decentering money. No. It's actually about building more. It's about more. It's not about reducing, it's about more. Give a little more, love a little more, hug a little more, be a bit more present. That's how we build solidarity that is not only dependent on the exchange of currency.
Where do I want to start from? Thank you so much, Mara. I've made so many notes. So I want to, we're on the topic of community care, building solidarity, strengthening movements, and all of that. I want to ask you, Emmanuel, how do you propose we bridge the gap between older and younger activists? And what relevance does this intergenerational collaboration hold for the overall strength of the LGBTQIA+ movement?
Thank you. So that's a conversation that's always chaotic when you go to spaces and activists talk about bridging the gaps between seasoned and upcoming activists, right? We really need to decolonize ideologies and strategies we use in organizing. It's very important, right? For we as African queer persons, we are rich in lived realities. We really need to understand this. Regardless of the fact that we have funders who provide resources for us, we should understand we are empowered with lived realities. We are very rich, our culture is rich, our traditions are quite rich, you understand. We should also leverage this in the work we do. It is very important we redefine leadership in our movements because over time, the least activists see leadership as authoritarianist, top to bottom, kind of thing. But it's not so. We really need to start, breaking these barriers and, deconstructing and reconstructing these things. It is very important. And in our organizing, it's very important we start talking around, representation and visibility for communities who are excluded. For instance, I was in a space recently and we're talking about the exclusion of masculine presenting trans women. And someone said, how is it possible for a person to be masculine and still claim to be a trans woman? And I said, no, we shouldn't box people into, labels. We should let people live in their individuality. It's very important. That's one of the key ways we can bridge the gaps, and also validation and recognition. A lot of young activists these days talks about how seasoned activists don't involve them in spaces and recognize the work they do over time. But it's very important we recognize the work upcoming, and seasoned activists have done over time, because it's very important we leverage on the works people have done over time. Another thing is establishment of mentorship programs. It is very important for seasoned activists to provide mentorships. And when you talk about mentorship, it shouldn't be an organized form of mentorship. It can be as little as providing guidance for young activists who are kind of confused with the way they go about things. It is very important, and also we really need to start having conversation around correcting the perception of the animosity that exists between seasoned and upcoming activists, because there's this competition there's this competition that exists in our movement where you see seasoned activists say things like, oh, this person is going so fast, they want to take over from us, they want to push us out of the space. Where do you want us to go? Yes, so it is very important to start having conversation around these things. Resource allocation, we should advance equitable allocation of resources. For independent activists like myself and Precious, we have our own challenge. Because I as a person, I do not see myself starting an organization because I am not wired that way. You understand? I've identified the fact that I can thrive as an independent activist and also contribute to the work of the community by doing my work independently. So how do I get resources to do this work? How do I get agency and spaces where I come and say, oh, I'm an independent activist and this is the work I've done over time. You understand? That's why, organizations and funders need to look at, equitable distribution of resources to both institutionalized organizations and independent activists as well. Inclusive leadership, it's very important to include young persons in leadership. We have persons who are executive directors for 15, 10 years. Why? It's not, I understand the fact that, our space is quite progressive and a lot of people have, put in a lot of work into the space. But it's high time we start looking at transitional leadership where we have, young and upcoming activists take up leadership spaces. That's one of the key ways to, reduce the pandemic of organizations springing up in every corner of Nigeria, because when conversation around impact is discussed, seriously, we are all doing the same thing, We have organizations who are, implementing projects around advocacy, and our understanding of advocacy is, paying visits to agencies and institutions to talk about the lived experiences of our community. But my understanding of advocacy is not visits. If I am to implement an advocacy project, I would not, engage any agency or institution for advocacy visit. We should look at leveraging research synthesis for advocacy. We should look at, documentation, collaboration. It is very important. Cross-sectoral collaboration. We should look at, transnational collaboration because our lived experiences are similar. And I was having a conversation in a space recently, and I talk about how interborder relationship and policies affect countries across West Africa. For instance, the SSMPA in Nigeria affects queer people in Benin as well. In Benin Republic, there's no law that criminalizes homosexuality. However, a lot of Beninese comes to Nigeria for business. A lot of Nigerians go there for business. And with the emergence of the SSMPA, information, right? People get information and get informed about the things that are happening in both countries. So these laws also affect people living in Benin Republic. So over time, we've had cases like increase in the amounts of human rights violation in Benin Republic as well. But we are not looking at these things. We should also look at building intergenerational solidarity. Building intergenerational solidarity is key. When we go to spaces, when we go to conferences, we should try as much as possible to allow young and upcoming voices speak. We should amplify the efforts and voices of young and upcoming voices, because our seasoned activists will leave this space one day. Then who are the persons or who are the people the torch will be passed to? If we don't build the capacity of young persons in our community who would, over time grow to take up these positions, then it means we ourselves are also impeding on, the efforts we are putting into the work we do. So it's very important we understand and be intentional about, amplifying the voices of young and upcoming activists in the LGBTIQ advocacy space.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Emmanuel. That was very, very insightful. Because at the end of the day, you find that a lot of people come up, and because they are young and new, they just say, oh wow, why don't we do this? Why don't we do this? But the people that have done it will tell you, okay, we've done it, and here are the lessons that we've learned. It makes the work much easier when you have someone you can consult and say, okay, have you tried this before? What has worked? What hasn't worked? That makes for a stronger movement. But you find that a lot of the time, our movements are disjointed in more ways than one, across ages, across identities, across class. It's a mess, but we're working on it and we're going somewhere. So, Precious, can you share with us, I know that this question was addressed in the previous panel, however, I would love to hear your response to it. What opportunities exist at the intersection of media and technology for the advancement and protection of LGBTQIA plus human rights, which you have identified in your work, also considering the fact that the anti-rights movement is also leveraging the same whatever media and technology things that. So like, just let us know what you think we can do.
So really, there are lots, there are lots of opportunities that exist that we are not even looking at. For instance, Chidima said, every time I walk into this university, I see this statue and it has this message. Please, is there any statue that we, any organization, any person, any individual has, tried to put up somewhere? It does not have to say LGBTQ or gay. It could be just teaching on abortion rights, teaching on maybe use of contraceptives. It could be something else, right? When women in America were, doing their work with the feminist movement, they laid siege in a magazine company for 11 hours. They said if we don't get our story published, we won't live here. I mean, we're talking of over 100 women. They packed into the office and all of that. I'm saying that in our organization, like in our organizing, we have to be more radical. I am telling you that we are sleeping. And every time you bring up something, people will say, oh, security reasons. And I will always say in gatherings that Rosa Parks sat on this bus, right? And you think she didn't think of security, this and that. It's time that we get fed up. It's time that we begin to be more strategic. Now, there is a story, children are doing this and doing that. Why are we not telling stories of children who are out of school? And how instead of being in school, children are used to carry out these activities. It's a story. Why are we not telling the story of the people on the road who are begging, leaking windscreen when you don't give them money? They come to clean your cars. People are telling you that, oh, if gay people get married, then we'll have less children. How are we not pointing to the children on the road who are already saturating the place? Have you adopted them finish? Have you finished taking care of all these ones? Go from here to Lekki now. You will see hundreds of them begging. Why are we not saying, oh, let's put a story. This story can tell us about these children. Where did they come from? Who are they? How can we help them? Why are you not adopting them? You like children so much. Thank you. God bless you. Why is it my own child that you are interested in? Like, oh, you have to meet with a man, you have to give birth to a child. Fine. And there are lots of ways that, we can have children. We all know that. But let's even deviate from that conversation and say, okay, there are plenty children here. Let's shine a light on those children. And when we talk about media and advocacy, who is the media? Every single one of us is the media. The lifestyle that we live out is the media. And I'm not going to say come out and put yourself at risk. But a lot of us are out. A lot of us are in, but there are people who are out. What are you doing with your voice? What stories are you telling? It could be a stories of just the people begging on the street. And that is why, next year I'm looking at, having a media fellowship, and you people did one, but this will be like a film fellowship where I will raise younger people who would learn how to produce these documentaries, tell these stories in 5 minutes, tell these stories in 10 minutes. Now we look at animation. You can tell a story without even going out there to do your research. Again, if you're interested in research, reach out to me. There are funding for people who want to go into research. When you do this research, you can tell an entire story sitting in your house. If you also learn how to do like maybe graphics, animation, VFX, and all of that, those are technological things that we can use to tell stories. You may not travel to Boko Haram camp to tell us of how they are doing A or B, but you can create that story. If you look at maybe again Human Angle or Hume Angle, I don't know what their name is. I watch their documentaries a lot. They do this kind of storytelling with animation. And they tell the story of things that happen in IDP camps, where women are raped, where things are happening. We sit down and it's like,
But you can't tell that story without doing your research. So research is key, and we lack that in our community. And beyond research, one of the reasons I went into telling, LGBTQI stories, queer stories, and all of that is because I can't find these stories anywhere. We do not document, it's a Nigerian thing, or I don't know if it's an African thing, but especially in Nigeria, we don't have stories that your grandmother told you. We don't have them anywhere. If you go to the internet and Google, you will see very little, documents or stories. Please tell your story, write it, put it on the internet. The day I Google your name, Jennifer, I will see your story. It will be on Google. It does not have to be, mainstream. And then what says we can't even do advocacy visit to the media houses? Is there somebody doing that? Because I don't know. These media houses, they need to, if they can't tell our stories, they need to also not tell against us. I don't know if you get me, like, instead of, okay, I can't tell your story, okay, fine, but can you at least also not begin to demonize us? So let's have that rapport with mainstream media, with bloggers, with people who push narratives. You saw there was this blogger that put a skit about somebody being, every Saturday there is a wedding, blah, blah, blah. That thing went far. The little 5 minutes that this person did it went really far. And it pushed a message to say that, you keep criminalizing these people, but these are part of the dangers. And so we can do what we can using technology. Learn VFX, learn animation, learn graphics design, put it out there. And organizations, please, when you do you write your proposal, you get people to talk, step it down. To some of us who are in this space to say, what can we do? What do we need? How can we capture these things? Because you look at an independent artist, we are hardly invited to meetings. We are hardly invited. You must come from an organization. If you're not from an organization, nobody will invite you. But then we need to be in these rooms to say that this is something that we can do, so that more and more young people will, push the message. Look at TikTok, for instance. People are blowing up that space. And that is a space that we can leverage on. Whether it is TikTok, whether it is, we can continue to put out our message. And when we make our films, what's our distribution channel? Please, we sit down here, we watch it, beautiful. They come off for here. It's annoying that I will put in 6 months of work and only 100 people will see it. Why are we not even putting our work out there? Why are we not distributing? Why are we not submitting to film festivals? It's not a bad thing. Some of our documentaries will go very far when we put them in film festivals, because these festivals are not only for LGBTQI persons, they are for everybody. So these are some of the strategies that we can employ. We should document our stories. I spoke to some, I'll borrow your word, seasoned activists, I hate that name, but some, very experienced older activists, because I'm also doing a documentary. I'm documenting the history of LGBTQI movement in Nigeria, right? And then this person tells me of a group called the Goddesses. Does anybody, have you ever heard of them? No. A group of lawyers, I think in the 80s, in the 70s, and they were doing organizing. I'm like, so what happened to them? And he's like, it's a long story, we'll talk about it later. But in the documentary, he was telling me of these people and how they organized. It was grassroots. People met at parties, people met at events, people organized. And that's the Goddesses, they were a group of professional lawyers. Everybody there was lawyer, gay men, very, it was who they were. And I'm still looking for evidence of them. Sorry, I can't find it. It's only what this person has told me. And now I am looking for who they are, where they are, who knows them, what can be shown, because we have to put that on the internet. We have to put these things. It is our story. And if we don't tell them, people will tell them for us. So key thing is for us to raise more people. What I mean by that, more storytellers. Let us raise more storytellers. And let us be strategic with our storytelling. Advocacy visit to media houses is not a bad thing. Let us include that. When we go for meetings, I see police, I see pastor, I know they see media people. I don't see them. And I've gone for several of these meetings. I don't see them. So can we include them? If they cannot tell our story, there is something they can do. And a big shout out to Zikoko, they are doing an amazing work. They shouldn't be the only one. They will tell a story of two people in relationship. They don't care. Oh, so I like this girl, she likes me. Nobody is asking. People read it. It is a way to change narratives. Let us begin to also make films. Tears was doing an amazing job with making films we can do better. And these films, we have to put it out there. What I always say is shove it down their throats. The same way they shove things down our throats. When they come with whatever horse they are riding the anti-rights agenda on, jump on that horse and ride it with them. Are we talking about children? Let's talk about children. What about all the children on the road? Oh, are we talking about marriage? Let us also talk about the divorce rates, among heterosexual. What are we talking about? Oh, upholding family values. We will jump and talk about it. We will not be afraid. We will continue to, wherever they put their mouth, let's put our mouths there. You post something on YouTube, they pay to bring it down. Can we mobilize and also pay to put it up? And also pay to make it remain there? And also pay to bring their own down? Because there's a lot going on behind the scene. So we feel like, oh, I've posted this thing. Only 10 people have seen it and I'm fine. Why do you think only 10 people saw it? Somebody paid money and made sure that anything that has these words will not exceed certain things. You have to push. And we have to pass, engage other people. Maybe in Nigeria, I can't post and get more than 10 likes. If I partner with someone in the US, if I partner with someone wherever they are, someone who it's easier for them to make this post and get more likes, then it will go, viral and all of that. So there are lots of ways, again, please. But if you're interested in research, please reach out to me, and I think next year we will talk about starting our film fellowship. Thank you.
Really exciting times ahead, honestly. It sounds like everyone is buzzing with ideas. Like, build fuel, do research, push back, counter narratives. Like, we're all ginger and we know what to do. I really hope we're all taking notes and we, see the impact of these conversations, and it won't just be nuggets of information that we keep at the back of our brains and do nothing with. Thank you so much, panelists, for the conversation. I don't have any more questions for you because we're out of time. I will open the floor for one or two questions. Hey, wow, I've already seen two hands. And 2 questions max, please. We have to keep it short.
Okay. All right. Sorry. I don't really have much of a question, but I actually just wanted to say this. Thank you very much. I think this panel was most needed. Omolara, see, I don't want to drop your mic at all, because this was very, very necessary. Because a lot of things that were said have been on my mind for the longest time. Especially when you come to things about hold on, because I read things. Because when you come to things like how you pointed out this about how you don't like the idea of LGBTQ community, you write LGBT persons. I also thought that even if you want to even say that is even a thing, the community as doesn't even feel like a community. Because you notice, we also pointed out the thing about how in a bit of trying to be inclusive, fight for inclusivity, just a lot of people are being excluded in the process. And it's very much it's counteractive at best. And even the thing you mentioned about funding and how it's not the whole thing about not being able to reach out for funds. I'm kind of I could actually attest to that. There have been several situations where I'm an artist and I've been seeing calls for apply for this, put your prayer, all of that. Is open to whatever, regardless of sexuality or sexual orientation. And then I put all of these things, and at the end of the day, I get a no. And even get to be in seminars where they talk about these things like this, and other non-white queer people point out the fact that they say, oh, it's open to queer people But there's like the definition of queerness is something that kind of like excludes non-white people. And you notice that you are fighting, like you're fighting a losing battle, you know, in a sense. So I'm really glad that this actually like came up. And see, there are lots of notes, and I'm going home with a lot. I want to say thank you all very, very, very much for this. It was really, really amazing. Thank you.
So yes, I'm going to be very brief as possible. I'm channeling my question to Suru. So before I channel that question to you, I would likely want to say thank you for talking about transitional leadership, because it's one very, very, very chronic disease that has dealt with organizations implementing for LGBTQI persons, plus in Nigeria. And you know, it's easy to speak English and we go back and the actions are not taken. Based on the things you said, there are a lot of persons. For instance, not everybody here are part of an organization. I used to work for a key populations project. Currently, I don't work for a key populations project. I work for a general populations project. But I'm here. I'm here because this is my community. This is where I belong. And whatever I do to raise money, this is whatever brings me here is the passion to ensure that whatever movement we have in the community keeps moving. But when I'm not recognized, when I'm not invited to spaces where I could speak for the people I know, how do you want me not? How do you expect me to now engage? And because people are seeing or people are understanding that the only way their voices can be heard is only when they start organizations. And I'm sorry if they are beginning to start organizations, it is not their fault, because that is the only way you people will notice them. Because it's gotten to that point, yes. There are a lot of key events, key places, spaces where people could speak for themselves. Omolara mentioned programming. There's a difference between programming and there's a difference between penetrating the community. Precious mentioned her experience with people in Calabar. I worked with communities downwards in different deep local governments in Calabar, Bakassi, Apabio, Ecom. These are places where you have community members who do not have some privileges. And you sit up there and make a program for them and you think it's going to work for them. It's not going to work for them. And then you do not penetrate this community, you do not look out. There are people who are there are activities you don't know about in these communities and they are doing stuff. How many times have you invited them? How many times have you mentored them? How many times have you given them the spaces to speak of the experiences they have in these communities? And then you now tell them not to start organizations. That's why a lot of people are beginning to say, oh, the only way I'm going to get noticed is only when I start an organization. Let me use Redeemed Christian Church of God. Just I'm rounding up. Redeemed Christian Church of God as an example. We can see that church is almost everywhere. And because it's everywhere, you can hardly see somebody there thinking of breaking out and making another church somewhere. So if we begin to notice these people, we begin to mentor them, bring them up, and so that they can, bring the experiences with these communities and tell them this is what is the core need of our community. Only then, I think, we'll put a pause to bringing up organizations that are not necessary and strengthening not just your programming, but as far deep, penetrating and making a change and leaving legacies in the deep-rooted communities. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that contribution. We can't take any. Oh, we want.
Okay, so sorry. I want to comment on the submission we just had. So the number one, I don't think there's any organization that is created with the right purpose in mind that is a waste. Nigeria is massive, right? And so I don't think the creation of the organizations in itself is a challenge. Is that what I'm hearing the community say is that people need space to breathe. People need space to express themselves. People need space to bring their work forward. But that's what I'm kind of hearing from this conversation. And it's an opportunity for us to come to a place of honesty. Because if we let this moment go, we will come back next year and discuss building solidarity. Without knowing, it's like, Audrey was describing how, a father was like a lion. Have you experienced that your parents, when you're younger, they have all these rules, now they want to be your friend and you're like, you need to die. Right? And that gets in the way of solidarity. So I don't want us to go away. I just didn't want us to lose that moment. of vulnerability, of where we are all nodding and snapping and clapping, saying that is true, and then go away again and act like it didn't happen, and then we start all over again. So we are hearing that there is need for people to express themselves. There is need for groups to become more visible. What are we going to do about that? It's one thing. Apart from intergenerational conversations, and what you said, I love what you said about leadership as well. It's about creating space for people to do what they need to do. So for example, going forward from here, one thing I'm learning is that when I need to do something, I will consult as far and as wide as possible. I will not stay within my scope, my worldview, and make decisions for bigger, more nuanced challenges. And if that's a promise that we can all make to ourselves today, to say, I will go the extra mile. I will do that extra thing required to, and when people are reaching out to me, I won't be non-perceptive, or what was that English word? To the stimulus I'm feeling from the outside. So I want to take this moment as like so important, so that we can all go away from here and think about how can we truly build solidarity beyond conversations. How can we truly build solidarity, and our movements, human rights movements, beyond, my space of influence? I think that's something we should all go away with. Either we belong to an NGO, or we're independent activists, or we work in, general spaces. Because personally, I do like the colonial feminist work, but I know that the colonial feminist work is impossible without LGBT liberation. Sexual reproductive health and rights liberation is impossible without LGBT liberation. It's all interconnected, and we should actually definitely bring more spaces into the room, more space, more voices into the space, rather. Thank you.
So sorry that we can't take any more questions. I'm so sorry, we're out of time. So let's just quickly take our panelist photo and then go into the next thing. Thank you so much. Please, another round of applause. Amazing. Fantastic. Thank you.
Today, even though we're expecting a really full house, the ticket for this event sold out under an hour, right? And I had a lot of people calling me and like, oh, I need a ticket. To my surprise, I'm seeing a lot of seats, but I want to hope that a lot of things held them back from coming here today. Thank you so much for participating. Thank you for listening in on the panel sessions. And thank you for this conversation. I hope that the notes you have taken will go back with you and will not just be all about conversation, but will also be about action and working together. So now we're moving to the next thing on the agenda, which is the launch of the 2023 Human Rights Violations Report. Now, this particular report is something that TIERS has been doing for the past 8-9 years, over 8-9 years. Every year, in partnership with organizations, we used to have 10 founding partners where we have ISHRAI, HAHAI, we have a whole lot of other organizations. Let me call them so nobody feels slighted. AGI, TEDI, ICA, and all of that. Then this year, we kind of expanded because it's not just 10 organizations that are within the movement. How can we get as many queer organizations to come into this partnership so that we can document these human rights violations and we can use it to support our work? So right now we have about 22 partners, including Tears. So even though that Tears is launching this is not the work of Tears, this is the work of all the partners you can see on this screen. 22 of these partners came together across Nigeria in their various states, documented and responded to human rights violations based on SOCIEST. And we compiled everything together and we have it here. So I want to call on, if you are a partner and you are here, please can you just come up and join us while we launch this report. So, yes, okay, Owen is here. So for Tears, Afalabi will join us. So other partners are not able to make it because they are not residents. The human rights violations report. So this is the 2023 Human Rights Violations Report, and we officially launch it. So thank you everyone. We'll definitely don't want to so hard for me. This report to everybody here, but we do not have a lot of copies and we are also trying to save the planet. So basically we have this in e-copies. And we know that a lot of people will take this home and not open it, only open it on their phones. So please, if you know you don't need a physical copies, let's save resources. Just keep this and go to the website and download this copy. So please, other tier staff, can you join because you all made this possible. Please, tier staff, Gamola, not now. When you were awake all night editing this. So we just take pictures. Okay, let's just take pictures. So we have come to the end of this program and I'll be handing the microphone over to Godwin for closing remarks.
Hello everyone, hello again. Thank you so much for being patient with us. I'm really grateful that you came to join us and we say thank you so much. So, action plan on creating space. Please reach out to Tears. Our informations are on the website. Reach out, ask for what you need. If we don't have funding, we might have knowledge to give. If we don't have money, we might have resources to share. And literally we are creating more spaces, and I hope that like in the coming months we will announce our new address, and there will be space to party if you want to party, you know. So we are creating more spaces, and thank you for coming. I really enjoyed everyone coming. And please, we have something to eat, like light refreshment. Just take this route so that you can get something. You know, we are not allowed to share food here. It's for the cream like cream. So so just take care so that I can get something to eat. Thank you everyone for coming.
This way for refreshments. There are several